Hello and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Smoke and Mirrors. Cole Harrington glanced at his watch, 2:47 a.m. The blue glow of his computer monitor illuminated his unshaven face as he reviewed the complex algorithm one final time. A gentle vibration from his phone broke his concentration. Still at the office? Don't forget my party tomorrow. Big announcement to make. Tessa. Cole rubbed his tired eyes. After 14 years of marriage to Tessa, he should have been used to her dismissive tone, but something in her recent behavior had shifted. The cold distance had transformed into something more deliberate, almost cruel. As founder of Nexus Security Solutions, Cole had built his cybersecurity empire from nothing, working 18-hour days to establish a reputation that made even the Pentagon call when they needed consultation. Yet his success paled in comparison to Tessa's meteoric rise at Altura Pharmaceuticals. In 3 short years, she'd gone from senior researcher to director of product development under CEO Bradford Reeves. To the outside world, they were the perfect power couple. Cole knew better. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from his longtime friend and employee, Dominic Walsh. Found something unusual in those files. We need to talk before you go home. Cole frowned. 2 weeks ago, he'd noticed irregularities in Tessa's behavior. Late nights, password changes on her devices, and that unfamiliar cologne on her blazer. Something his grandmother once told him echoed in his mind. Trust is given, loyalty is earned, and betrayal is never forgotten. Dominic knocked on his office door before entering, his expression grave. Remember that encrypted backup you asked me to recover from Tessa's old laptop? I finally cracked it. Dominic handed him a USB drive. There's a folder of deleted messages. I didn't read them, but the timestamps matched those nights she claimed to be working late. Cole inserted the drive. Thanks. Go home to Marissa and the kids. It's late. After Dominic left, Cole opened the files. What he found made his blood run cold. Hundreds of messages between Tessa and Bradford Reeves. Intimate, detailed, planning rendezvous while Cole was traveling for work. The affair had been going on for nearly a year. Cole leaned back in his chair, his face expressionless. The pain that should have surfaced was immediately eclipsed by something darker. A cold, calculated rage that clarified rather than clouded his thinking. His phone rang. It was his mother. Cole, sweetheart, just confirming we're still coming to Tessa's celebration tomorrow. Your father is so proud of her promotion. Cole's jaw tightened. His parents had always favored Tessa, seeing in her the success they wished their son had achieved more conventionally. Yes, Mom. Everyone will be there. Wonderful. Oh, and don't forget to pick up the special champagne she likes. After hanging up, Cole opened his safe and removed a small black notebook, his contingency plan for every major client, competitor, and potential threat. He opened to a blank page and wrote a single name, Bradford Reeves. Below it, he added, strategy required. Chapter 2. The Beautiful Lie. The Altura Pharmaceuticals corporate penthouse gleamed with success and opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while servers circulated with champagne and artisanal hors d'oeuvres. Tessa Harrington commanded the room in her crimson dress, laughing with colleagues and accepting congratulations on her promotion to executive vice president. Cole stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey. His mother approached, her smile tight with disapproval. Cole, darling, why aren't you mingling? This is Tessa's big night. Just enjoying the view, Mom. His father joined them, clapping him on the shoulder. Son, you need to network more. Half the biotech industry is here. Could be good for your computer business. Cole nodded, familiar with his father's dismissive attitude toward his work. Gregory Harrington had never understood why his son had turned down law school to pursue cybersecurity. Across the room, Bradford Reeves entered, his tailored suit and silver hair projecting authority and success. At 52, he had divorced 3 years ago and became one of the city's most eligible bachelors. The crowd parted as he made his way to Tessa, placing a hand on the small of her back as he whispered something in her ear. Cole watched as Tessa's eyes flashed with desire, poorly disguised as professional admiration. "Isn't Bradford remarkable?" Cole's mother commented. "He's taking the company public next quarter. Tessa says the IPO will make history." "Remarkable indeed," Cole replied, taking another sip of his whiskey. An hour later, dinner was served. Cole found himself directed to a side table with distant colleagues, while Tessa sat at the center with Bradford and the board members. When the servers brought out the main course, Wagyu beef with truffle reduction, Cole was handed a plate of what appeared to be leftover appetizers and garnishes. He looked up questioningly at the server, who shrugged apologetically and murmured, "Mrs. Harrington's instructions." Tessa approached his table with two of her friends, champagne flute in hand. "My wife threw a huge party for her bonus. She handed me a plate of scraps. Even a dog gets better, but you're used to it," she said to her friends. My parents nodded along. I ate in silence. Cole felt every eye in the room on him. His parents, seated nearby, offered no support. His mother even gave a small laugh as if Tessa had made a harmless joke. Cole maintained his composure, methodically eating the scraps while cataloging every face that witnessed his humiliation. Suddenly, Bradford Reeves appeared at his table, his presence commanding immediate attention. To everyone's shock, he sat down across from Cole and signaled the server. "Bring me exactly what Mr. Harrington is having," he ordered. The room fell silent as Bradford began eating from an identical plate of scraps. "Exquisite," Bradford announced. Sometimes the simplest foods reveal the most about character. Then, in a move that left the crowd gasping, Bradford removed his Seville road jacket and bent down to wipe a scuff from Cole's shoes. Suddenly, her CO burst in and started eating the same food as mine. Then he cleaned my shoes with his Gucci suit, saying, "OMG, she doesn't realize her mistake." My wife froze as the CEO whispered. "Your wife clearly doesn't understand who she's dealing with," Bradford said, his voice low but audible to those nearby. "I've been following your work in quantum encryption for years. The Pentagon doesn't call just anyone." Cole studied Bradford's face, searching for deception, but finding only calculated sincerity. Tessa stood frozen, her champagne flute trembling slightly as Bradford straightened and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, while we celebrate Tessa's promotion tonight, I'd like to acknowledge another brilliant mind in our midst. Cole Harrington's security protocols are protecting half the Fortune 500, including our company. To overlooked genius." Bradford raised his glass, and the room followed, confusion evident on many faces, none more so than Tessa's. As the party resumed, Bradford leaned closer to Cole. "Meet me tomorrow. My office, 9 a.m. We have something important to discuss." His smile never reached his eyes. "And bring your contingency notebook." Cole felt a chill. How could Bradford know about his private notebook? Across the room, Tessa's face had transformed from shock to thinly veiled panic as she watched the two men speaking. Chapter 3. Pawns and Kings. Cole arrived at Bradford's office precisely at 9 a.m., his black notebook tucked into his jacket pocket. The Altura Executive Suite occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower downtown, offering commanding views of the city below. Bradford's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Helena, greeted him with professional courtesy. "Mr. Reeves is expecting you, Mr. Harrington. Would you like coffee before you go in?" "No, thank you," Cole replied, studying her. "How long have you worked for Mr. Reeves?" 15 years, she answered, a flicker of something, pride, complicity, crossing her face. "I've been with him through all his transitions." Bradford's office door opened, and the CEO himself appeared, impeccably dressed as always. "Cole, right on time. Come in, please." Once inside the expansive office, Bradford gestured toward a sitting area rather than his imposing desk. "I imagine you have questions about last night," Bradford began once they were seated. "A few," Cole acknowledged, revealing nothing in his expression. Bradford steepled his fingers. "Your wife has been having an affair." "With me?" Cole's face remained impassive, which seemed to please Bradford. No displays of shocked outrage. "Good. That confirms what I suspected about you." Bradford leaned forward. Here's what you don't know. I orchestrated the affair to get to you. Cole allowed one eyebrow to rise slightly. 3 years ago, your security firm prevented a cyber attack that would have stolen intellectual property from Altura, specifically my breakthrough cardiac medication formula. I later learned it was your personal intervention, not your team's, that stopped it. The attack originated from my chief competitor, Radiant Pharmaceuticals. Bradford's expression hardened. Their CEO, Victor Kane, and I have a complicated history. Why are you telling me this? Cole asked. Because Kane hasn't stopped. My sources tell me he's planning something bigger. Not just stealing my research, but destroying Altura entirely. I need your expertise. And my wife? Where does she figure in this plan of yours? Bradford waved dismissively. Tessa was the easiest way to observe you up close. Brilliant in her field, certainly, but remarkably susceptible to flattery and ambition. The affair was simply expedient, a means to understand what motivates you. Cole felt the rage building inside him, but kept it carefully contained. You used her to get to me, and now you're betraying her to forge an alliance? Business isn't personal, Cole. Bradford smiled coldly. Though I suspect last night felt very personal to you. What exactly do you want from me? Bradford stood and walked to his desk, returning with a file. Victor Kane isn't just my business rival. 20 years ago, he was my research partner and my wife's lover. When our initial cardiac formula showed promise, he stole it, along with my wife, and tried to patent it himself. I managed to prove the theft, but the scandal destroyed my marriage. Cole took the file and scanned it. Revenge seems to be a motivating factor for you. Justice, Bradford corrected, which I believe you're currently seeking yourself. Cole closed the file. If you orchestrated this affair to recruit me, why allow Tessa to humiliate me publicly? Bradford's smile turned predatory. 2 reasons. First, to see how you'd respond under extreme pressure. Your control was impressive. Second, to create a situation where Tessa would lose all credibility when the truth comes out. He paused. I've already selected her replacement. The promotion was merely theatrical. Cole studied the man across from him, calculating, ruthless, seeing people as pieces on a chessboard. A mirror of what Cole himself could become if he surrendered fully to the rage inside him. And if I refuse to help you? Then you leave with all the evidence of your wife's infidelity, but none of the resources I can offer for whatever you're planning. Bradford gestured to Cole's jacket pocket. That notebook isn't just for contingencies against enemies, is it? It's for everyone who might betray you, including Tessa. Cole stood. I'll consider your offer. As he reached the door, Bradford added, Last night wasn't just about observing you, Cole. It was about giving you a gift, the perfect justification for whatever you choose to do next. No one who witnessed that humiliation would blame you. Cole left without responding, his mind already calculating possibilities, strategies, and outcomes. In the elevator, he removed his phone and sent a text to Dominic. Need complete background on Victor Kane and all Radiant Pharmaceuticals executives. Priority. When he arrived home, the house was empty. Tessa had left a note at my parents' house. Need time to think. We should talk tomorrow. Cole crumpled the note and dropped it into the trash. Opening his notebook, he began to write, forming a plan that would change everything, not just for Tessa and Bradford, but for everyone who had witnessed his humiliation and done nothing. On the first page, he wrote, Operation Glasshouse. Chapter 4, The Art of War. Cole sequestered himself in his home office for the next 48 hours, emerging only for coffee and to receive the files Dominic delivered personally. Tessa called repeatedly, then texted with increasing urgency, but Cole maintained his silence. Please come to my parents' house so we can talk. I can explain everything. Cole, at least tell me you're okay. I'm worried about you. Bradford called an emergency board meeting. What did you say to him? On the 3rd day, Cole finally sent a single response. Coming tonight. 8 p.m. Be alone. Dominic sat across from Cole's desk, concern evident on his face. You haven't slept, have you? Cole gestured to the wall, where he'd created an intricate network of connections, photos, documents, and timelines linked with colored string. I've been busy, Cole replied. What did you find on Victor Kane? Dominic handed him a thick folder. The official stuff is what you'd expect. Harvard MBA, aggressive acquisition strategy, 3 marriages. The unofficial material is more interesting. He has gambling debts in Macau, a 26-year-old mistress he installed as community relations director, and he's been selling shares of his own company through shell corporations. Anything connecting him directly to Bradford Reeves beyond their professional history? Yes. Kane's first wife, the one who left Bradford for him, died in a boating accident 6 months after their marriage. Kane collected a substantial insurance payout. Investigation ruled it accidental, but the detective noted inconsistencies in Kane's statement. Cole added this information to his wall, and Bradford's claim about a planned attack on Altura seems legitimate. Our security monitoring picked up unusual probing of Altura's networks last month. Not sophisticated enough to be state-sponsored, but persistent. Cole nodded. What about my parents? Any communication between them and Tessa since the party? Dominic shifted uncomfortably. Cole, are you sure you want me to? All information is relevant, Dom. Dominic sighed. 8 calls from your mother to Tessa. 2 from your father. Content summary from the voice transcripts suggests they're concerned about you, but also advise Tessa to remind you how much your career has benefited from her connections. Cole's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. And my in-laws, Harvey and Melissa Blackwell, have been in contact with Bradford Reeves directly. Appears they're concerned about their daughter's position at Altura, given the current circumstances. Cole made another note on his wall, then checked his watch. I need to get ready for my meeting with Tessa. While I'm gone, I need you to set up untraceable accounts for the transfers we discussed. Dominic hesitated. Cole, I've known you since college. I've never seen you like this. Are you sure you don't want to just what, Dom? Divorce her quietly? Pretend the public humiliation never happened? Except that my own parents took her side? Cole's voice remained even, but his eyes flashed dangerously. Everyone made their choices. Now, they get to live with the consequences. What about Bradford's offer? Are you going to help him against Kane? Cole smiled for the first time in days. I'm going to help everyone get exactly what they deserve. Later that evening, Cole arrived at his in-laws' Tudor-style mansion in the exclusive Lakeview district. Harvey Blackwell, a retired judge, had never approved of Cole, considering him beneath his daughter despite his financial success. Tessa opened the door herself, her face showing signs of stress and interrupted sleep. You came, she said softly. Thank you. Cole followed her to the garden patio, where they would have privacy from her parents. In the twilight, surrounded by Harvey's prize-winning roses, Tessa looked both beautiful and fragile in a way that might once have moved Cole. I need to explain about the party, she began. I was drunk and showing off for the board members. It was stupid and cruel, and I'll never forgive myself. Is that all you need to explain? Cole asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Tessa's eyes widened slightly. What did Bradford tell you? Everything. The affair. How it started. Why it started. Cole maintained steady eye contact. His particular interest in me and my company. Tessa sank into a patio chair. It wasn't supposed to happen. He was so attentive, so interested in my research when no one else seemed to care. One late night led to another, and then you decided to humiliate your husband at your celebration, in front of his parents and the entire industry. Cole's voice remained calm. Do you know what's interesting, Tessa? Not once in this explanation have you actually said you're sorry. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Of course I'm sorry. I love you, Cole. The affair was a terrible mistake. Bradford means nothing to me. It was just flattery and excitement. What did Bradford tell you after the party? Tessa looked away. He said I'd misjudged the situation badly, that he'd only pursued me to get closer to you and your security expertise, that my promotion would be reconsidered. Her voice broke. He's destroying my career, Cole. Everything I've worked for. Cole nodded slowly. And that's what matters most to you, isn't it? Your career, your reputation. That's not fair, Tessa protested. I care about us, about our marriage. Tell me something, Tessa. That night at the party, when you handed me that plate of scraps and made your little joke about dogs, did you feel powerful? Did it feel good to show everyone that the great Tessa Blackwell Harrington had outgrown her husband? Tessa's silence was answer enough. I came here tonight to tell you two things, Cole continued. First, I'll be moving your personal items to storage this week. The house keys have been changed. You're locking me out of her home? Tessa gasped. You can't do that legally. Actually, I can. The house is solely in my name. Your idea, if you recall, to protect your assets during our risky startup phase. I'm sure your father, the judge, can explain the implications. Tessa's shock turned to anger. And the second thing? Bradford Reeves didn't fire you. Yet, he's waiting for my decision on a potential collaboration between our companies. Hope flickered in Tessa's eyes. So, you could help me keep my position? Cole studied her for a long moment. 14 years of marriage. And that's your question? Not whether I'll forgive you or if we can save our relationship, but whether I'll help you keep your job. He stood to leave. I haven't decided what I'm going to do, Tessa. But I promise you this. When I'm finished, everyone will receive exactly what they've earned. As Cole walked back through the house, Harvey Blackwell stepped from his study. Running away instead of working things out, the older man challenged. Typical. Cole stopped. Judge Blackwell, given your distinguished career on the bench, I've always respected your commitment to justice. So let me ask you, what would be a just outcome here? The older man frowned. Marriage has difficulties. Tessa made a mistake, but destroying her career out of revenge is beneath you. Interesting that you immediately assume I'd target her career rather than, say, her dignity. The way she targeted mine. Cole moved closer. Tell me, if I had publicly humiliated Tessa, slept with her colleague, would you be advising her to reconcile? Or would you be helping her take me for everything I'm worth? Harvey's silence confirmed Cole's suspicion. That's what I thought, Cole said. You know, your daughter takes after you in many ways. You both believe rules apply to everyone except yourselves. As Cole reached his car, his phone buzzed with a message from Bradford. Decision time, Cole. My office tomorrow, 10 a.m. Choose wisely. Chapter 5. Smoke and Mirrors. Bradford Reeves' office seemed different in the morning light. Less imposing, more sterile. Cole arrived precisely at 10 a.m., dressed in a bespoke suit that projected confidence and control. You look better than the last time I saw you, Bradford observed, gesturing for Cole to sit. Have you made your decision? Before I answer, I'd like to understand the complete picture, Cole replied. You mentioned Victor Kane is planning to attack Altura. What's his objective? Bradford walked to the windows overlooking the city. Altura's cardiac medication, CardioFix, has completed final trials with unprecedented success rates. FDA approval is expected within months. Once approved, it will revolutionize treatment for heart failure and generate billions in revenue. And Kane wants to steal the formula. No, he wants to destroy it, and Altura along with it. His own competing drug failed its Phase 3 trial spectacularly last year. If CardioFix succeeds, Radiant Pharmaceuticals becomes irrelevant. Cole nodded. So this is about survival for him. Desperation makes people dangerous. Precisely why I need your expertise. Bradford returned to his seat. My security team is excellent at conventional threats, but Kane operates differently. He finds leverage, personal weaknesses, hidden shames, private vices, and exploits them, like you did with my wife. Cole asked mildly. Bradford had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. An unfortunate but necessary strategy. The difference is that I'm offering you honesty now, while Kane deals exclusively in deception. Cole leaned forward. Here's what I don't understand. With your resources, you could hire any security firm in the world. Why orchestrate this elaborate scheme to get to me specifically? Because you understand personal vendettas, Bradford said simply. You know how they motivate people, how they blind them. Other security experts see only data points and system vulnerabilities. You see the human element. Cole considered this. And if I agree to help you, what happens to Tessa? That depends on you. I have no further use for her, professionally or otherwise. Her future at Altura, or lack thereof, is a bargaining chip I'm prepared to offer. And what do you get if I help you neutralize Kane? Bradford smiled. Beyond the obvious protection of my company? The satisfaction of finally closing a painful chapter from my past. Kane took everything from me once. I won't allow it to happen again. Cole stood and paced the office, examining the awards and photographs documenting Bradford's rise to pharmaceutical prominence. I'll help you, Cole finally said. On 3 conditions. Bradford raised an eyebrow. Name them. First, I work independently. My team, my methods, no oversight from your security personnel. Agreed, with reasonable updates on progress. Second, Tessa retains her position and promotion for now. Any changes to her employment status happen on my timeline, not yours. Bradford frowned but nodded. And the third condition? You provide me complete access to Altura's executive files, including yours. Absolutely not, Bradford replied immediately. That's beyond the scope of this arrangement. Cole headed for the door. Then find another security expert. I'm sure there are many who'd be eager to work with the great Bradford Reeves. Wait, Bradford called. Limited access to relevant files only, with my prior approval. Cole turned back. You approached me because I understand vendettas. So you should understand this. I don't trust you, Bradford. I don't trust that your interest in me is solely about Kane, and I don't trust that you've told me everything about your history with him. Bradford stared at him for a long moment. Fine. Supervised access to executive files relevant to security concerns. That's my final offer. Cole extended his hand. We have a deal. I'll need office space here and credentials that give me appropriate access. Helena will arrange everything. Bradford shook Cole's hand firmly. Welcome to Altura, Mr. Harrington. As Cole left Bradford's office, Helena handed him a security badge and a folder of orientation materials. Mr. Reeves has assigned you Office 2110. It's being prepared now. Her efficient tone softened slightly. For what it's worth, Mr. Harrington, I've never seen him compromise on file access before. You've made quite an impression. Cole studied her carefully. Helena, you worked with Bradford for 15 years. In your opinion, what drives him more, success or retribution? She maintained her professional demeanor, but something flickered in her eyes. Mr. Reeves is a complicated man. I believe he sees them as one and the same. Within hours, Cole had established a secondary workspace at Altura. Dominic joined him, bringing equipment and specialized software that raised eyebrows among Altura's IT staff. Are we really hunting for corporate spies? Or is this part of something else? Dominic asked quietly as they set up their systems. Both, Cole replied. Bradford is telling the truth about Kane targeting Altura, but he's lying about why he brought me in. How can you be sure? Cole pulled up a document on his secure tablet. Because I've been monitoring Bradford's private communications since the party. Look at this message to his lawyer from yesterday. Dominic read the screen and whistled softly. He's preparing to sell Altura right before the FDA approval. And right before their IPO, Cole confirmed. Something doesn't add up. Helping Bradford against Kane isn't the endgame. It's just the opening move. What about Tessa? Have you spoken to her since last night? Cole's expression darkened. She's been calling and texting. I haven't responded. Dominic hesitated. Cole, I've been your friend for 20 years. I've never seen you like this. Are you sure you don't want to just walk away from all of this? Tessa, Bradford, all of it. Did you know my parents called me last night? Cole said instead of answering directly. Not to ask how I was doing after discovering my wife's affair. No. They called to remind me how much my small security company has benefited from Tessa's connections and to suggest I consider the practical aspects of reconciliation. They've always been tough on you, Dominic acknowledged. It's not about being tough. It's about basic loyalty. Cole's voice remained calm, but his eyes had turned cold. Every person involved in this situation has shown their true character. Now, they'll experience the consequences of their choices. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Bradford. Board meeting tomorrow, 3 p.m. Your presence requested to discuss security initiatives. Formal announcement of partnership. Tomorrow we make our first move, Cole told Dominic. Start the data collection protocols we discussed. I want everything. Board communications, research files, financial transfers, and personal communications where legally accessible. What should I tell the team about what we're looking for? Cole looked through the glass walls of his new office at the bustling Altura headquarters. Somewhere in this building, Tessa was working, probably wondering what her husband was planning. Tell them we're conducting a comprehensive security audit to protect Altura from corporate espionage. Cole's expression revealed nothing of his true intentions, which is entirely accurate, just not complete. Chapter 6. The Silent Storm. The Altura boardroom fell silent as Cole finished his presentation. For the past hour, he had methodically outlined the security vulnerabilities he'd discovered in just 3 days of analysis. Weaknesses that could potentially give Victor Kane access to Altura's most valuable research. As you can see, Cole concluded, gesturing to the complex network diagram displayed on the screen, your current security protocols are fundamentally sound, but contain critical blind spots. These gaps aren't accidental. They've been engineered over time to create specific access points. Bradford Reeves leaned forward. Are you suggesting we have a mole within Altura? The evidence points to deliberate security compromises dating back approximately 18 months, Cole replied. Whether this represents a single insider or multiple compromised employees remains to be determined. The board members exchanged troubled glances. Philip Morrison, the septuagenarian chief financial officer, removed his glasses nervously. What do you recommend, Mr. Harrington? A compartmentalized approach, Cole said, advancing to his next slide. First, we isolate and secure the CardioFix research data using my proprietary encryption system. Second, we implement a digital tripwire network to detect unauthorized access attempts. Third, we monitor all internal communications through a specialized filtering algorithm designed to identify suspicious patterns. That third recommendation sounds potentially invasive, objected Sophia Winters, Altura's general counsel. There are privacy considerations for our employees. Cole turned to her. Ms. Winters, if you prefer, I could simply provide a list of employees who've accessed sensitive files outside normal business hours in the past 6 months, including dates, times, and the specific data they examined. Would that be helpful? Sophia blanched slightly. 3 weeks earlier, she had reviewed confidential merger documents at midnight. A legitimate action, but one she'd told no one about. Your approach seems sound, she conceded. Bradford stood, effectively ending the discussion. The board authorizes Mr. Harrington to implement all recommended security measures immediately. We'll reconvene in 1 week to review progress. He turned to Cole. I believe you've already met my executive vice president, Tessa Harrington. All eyes turned to Tessa, who sat rigid in her chair at the far end of the table. She had carefully avoided eye contact with Cole throughout the meeting. Yes, Cole replied neutrally. Mrs. Harrington and I are acquainted. A ripple of uncomfortable awareness moved through the room. Though nothing had been officially announced, rumors of Tessa's marital problems had begun circulating through Altura's executive ranks. Excellent, Bradford continued smoothly. Mrs. Harrington will serve as your administrative liaison to ensure you have all necessary resources. Tessa's head snapped up, surprise evident on her face. Being assigned as Cole's liaison was effectively a demotion, administrative work far below her position as EVP. Mr. Reeves, she began, given my current responsibilities with the CardioFix launch preparation. This is precisely why you're the ideal liaison, Bradford interrupted. Your intimate knowledge of our flagship product makes you uniquely qualified to understand the security requirements. The double meaning of intimate knowledge was lost on no one. Several board members studied their tablets with sudden interest. Of course, Tessa acquiesced, her professional mask firmly in place despite the humiliation. I'm happy to assist however needed. As the meeting adjourned, Cole gathered his materials, ignoring the curious glances from board members eager to observe any interaction between him and Tessa. Bradford approached, lowering his voice. The liaison assignment, was that too much? I thought it might appeal to your sense of symmetry. My focus is securing your company, not managing my personal affairs, Cole replied coldly. In the future, consult me before making assignments that affect my work. Bradford seemed taken aback by the rebuke, but nodded. Point taken. As the boardroom emptied, Tessa remained seated, clearly waiting for a private word. Cole deliberately took his time organizing his presentation materials until they were alone. "Was this your idea?" Tessa asked, her voice tight. "Having Bradford assign me as your glorified assistant?" "No," Cole replied honestly, though I'm not surprised by his tactics. He enjoys the manipulation. "Like you're enjoying this?" Tessa gestured between them. "Watching me squirm? Refusing my calls? Moving my things out of our home?" Cole finally looked directly at her. "I'm not enjoying any of this, Tessa. But unlike you, I'm not pretending this situation is anything other than what it is, the end of our marriage." Tessa's composure cracked. "I made a horrible mistake, Cole. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. But 14 years together has to count for something." "It counted for something right up until you decided it didn't," Cole replied. "Right up until you chose to humiliate me publicly and sleep with your boss to advance your career." "That's not fair," Tessa protested. "The affair was a terrible mistake, but it wasn't calculated. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Tessa. People make choices." Cole gathered his materials. "As your liaison assignment demonstrates, Bradford is a vindictive man who enjoys exercising power over others. You chose him as your lover. Now you get to experience what that really means." As he moved toward the door, Tessa called after him. "What are you really doing here, Cole? This isn't just about corporate security, is it?" Cole paused without turning around. "I'm doing exactly what Bradford hired me to do. Identifying vulnerabilities and eliminating threats. The fact that you feel concerned suggests you recognize yourself in that category." Later that evening, Cole met with Dominic in their secure office at Altura. The regular workday had ended, leaving the executive floor mostly deserted. "Did you implement the monitoring systems?" Cole asked. Dominic nodded. "Active on all executive communications channels. Bradford doesn't realize it, but the board authorization you received today gives us legal cover for almost everything we're doing." "Almost everything?" "Well, the parallel system that's tracking Bradford's personal devices might fall into a gray area." Dominic grimaced. "Are you sure this is necessary, Cole? The security threat from Kane seems legitimate. We could just do the job we were hired for." Cole pulled up a series of documents on his secure tablet. "Look at these financial transfers from Bradford's personal accounts. $5 million to a shell company in the Caymans 3 months ago. Another $7 million last month. He's moving his money offshore while preparing to take Altura public. That's suspicious, but not necessarily illegal," Dominic pointed out. "No, but this is..." Cole swiped to another document. "Bradford has been systematically falsifying certain cardiofix trial results. The medication works, but it has serious side effects in about 8% of patients. Side effects he's buried in the data." Dominic's eyes widened. "If that gets out after the IPO, Altura's stock collapses, thousands of patients could be harmed, and Bradford walks away with hundreds of millions while blaming the research team, including Tessa." Cole's expression hardened. He's setting her up to take the fall while he escapes with his fortune. "So what's our play here? Turn him in to the FDA?" "Not yet," Cole replied. "First, we need to understand his entire plan. Bradford isn't just running from potential scandal. He's systematically preparing for something specific. The offshore accounts, the falsified data, the accelerated IPO timeline. He knows something we don't." Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Bradford. "Need to meet. My house. 10 p.m. Come alone. Critical development with Kane." "What do you think?" Cole showed Dominic the message. "Could be legitimate. Could be a trap." Dominic frowned. "You shouldn't go alone." "I won't be alone," Cole assured him. "I'll have you monitoring everything remotely. Set up the surveillance package we discussed." As Cole prepared to leave, Dominic asked, "What about Tessa? Should we tell her what Bradford's planning?" Cole paused. "Not yet. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences, at least for a while longer." Later that night, Cole arrived at Bradford's palatial estate in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood. The house was an ultra-modern structure of glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking the city lights below. A silent security guard escorted Cole through the minimalist interior to a back terrace where Bradford waited, nursing a glass of scotch. "Thank you for coming," Bradford said, not bothering to rise. "Drink. I prefer to keep a clear head," Cole replied, taking the seat opposite Bradford. "You mentioned a critical development with Kane." Bradford studied Cole thoughtfully before responding. "Victor contacted me directly today. After years of silence, he suddenly wants to meet, just the two of us, no lawyers, no security." "And you're considering it?" Cole asked skeptically. "I'm considering what it means," Bradford corrected. "Victor doesn't make impulsive moves. If he's reaching out now, it's because he's either desperate or confident, neither of which is good for Altura." Cole leaned forward. What exactly did his message say? Bradford pulled out his phone and read, "Brad, we both know what's coming. Meet me at the place where it all began. Just us like old times. One chance to avoid mutual destruction. 48 hours. The place where it all began. Our old lab at Westridge University," Bradford explained, "where we developed the original cardiac formula before everything fell apart." Cole processed this information. "It's almost certainly a trap." "Of course it is," Bradford agreed. "The question is what kind, and is there a way to turn it to our advantage?" As they discussed possibilities, Cole noticed a shadow pass briefly across one of the large windows overlooking the terrace. Someone else was in the house, moving quietly. "You told me to come alone," Cole noted casually. "I assumed the same applied to you." Bradford smiled thinly. "My head of security is inside. Standard procedure for all meetings here." "Sensible," Cole acknowledged, though he suspected Bradford was lying. The movement hadn't matched typical security protocols. Their discussion continued for another hour, developing strategies for the potential meeting with Kane. As Cole prepared to leave, Bradford walked him to the door. "One more thing, Cole. Your security implementation at Altura. It's been noted that your systems are monitoring all executive communications. As authorized by the board," Cole reminded him. "Including mine?" Cole met his gaze directly. "Especially yours, since you became Kane's primary target." Bradford nodded slowly. "Just making sure we understand each other." "Good night, Cole." On the drive home, Cole contacted Dominic through their secure channel. "Were you able to access Bradford's home system?" "Yes," Dominic confirmed. "And you were right. He had someone else there. Not security. I caught a partial reflection in one of the windows. It was Sophia Winters, Altura's general counsel." "Interesting," Cole mused. "Pull everything we have on her and run a deep background check on that meeting location, Westridge University's old research labs. I want to know exactly what happened there 20 years ago between Bradford, Kane, and Bradford's ex-wife." "Already on it," Dominic assured him. "One more thing. Tessa, try to access your security protocols at Altura today." 3 separate attempts. Cole's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Let her think she failed due to technical issues. Then plant the false data package we prepared in a location she can access. Let's see what she does with it." "Cole," Dominic's voice turned serious. "How far are you planning to take this?" Cole watched the city lights blur past his window. "Until recently, I believed there were lines I wouldn't cross, principles I wouldn't compromise. Then I watched my wife humiliate me in front of an entire room of people while my own parents nodded along." His voice remained calm, but took on a chilling certainty. "Now I understand there are no lines, Dom. Only consequences." Chapter 7. Checkmate. The abandoned Westridge University research facility stood in eerie silence, its once state-of-the-art laboratories now outdated and dusty. Cole moved through the shadows, having arrived 2 hours before the scheduled meeting between Bradford and Victor Kane. Dominic's voice came through his discreet earpiece. "All surveillance equipment is online. You've got eyes and ears throughout the building." "Perfect," Cole murmured. "Any movement outside?" "Nothing yet. But Cole, I've completed that deep background search on what happened here 20 years ago. It's worse than we thought." "Give me the highlights." "Bradford and Kane weren't just research partners," Dominic explained. "They were best friends since childhood. Bradford's wife, Elizabeth, had been Kane's girlfriend in college before choosing Bradford. The three of them founded their first pharmaceutical company together right here in this lab. So the betrayal was personal as well as professional," Cole noted, positioning a final camera in the corner of what appeared to be the main meeting room. "Extremely." But here's what doesn't add up. According to court records, Bradford won the lawsuit against Kane for intellectual property theft. Kane's career should have been over, but 6 months later, he somehow secured major funding and launched Radiant Pharmaceuticals. Cole paused. Someone backed him. Someone with resources who wanted to compete against Bradford. That's my guess, Dominic agreed. And one more thing. Elizabeth Reeves didn't just leave Bradford for Kane. She died in that boating accident while Bradford was supposed to be with her. He canceled at the last minute due to work commitments, leaving Kane to take her out on the water instead. Cole processed this information. Bradford blames Kane for her death, but Kane might blame Bradford for not being there to prevent it. Exactly. This isn't just corporate rivalry. It's 20 years of festering hatred. A car's headlights swept across the building's facade. Someone's arriving, Cole reported, moving to his concealed position in an adjacent room. Keep monitoring all channels. Bradford Reeves entered the building alone, his expensive shoes echoing on the tile floor. He moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the layout despite the years that had passed. In the main laboratory, he stopped and stared at an old workbench, running his fingers along its scarred surface. 15 minutes later, another set of headlights appeared. Victor Kane entered, a tall, gaunt man with sharp features and calculating eyes. Unlike Bradford's confident stride, Kane moved cautiously, glancing around as if expecting an ambush. Bradford, Kane acknowledged as he entered the lab, still punctual after all these years. Victor, Bradford replied coldly, still sneaking around like a thief. The two men regarded each other with thinly veiled hostility. You know why I called this meeting, Kane said finally. Enlighten me. CardioFix is going to fail, Bradford. Not because it doesn't work, but because you know it isn't safe for everyone. Those suppressed trial results will eventually come out. Bradford's expression betrayed nothing. Baseless accusations from a desperate competitor. We both know they're not baseless, Kane countered. I have copies of the original trial data before your team edited them. 8% severe adverse reactions is far above acceptable limits. From his hiding place, Cole watched Bradford's micro-expressions shift subtly. Surprise, then calculation. Even if such data existed, it would be inadmissible evidence obtained through corporate espionage, Bradford replied smoothly. Your credibility is non-existent, Victor. No one would believe you over me. Kane smiled thinly. That's why I'm not the one who's going to reveal it. He pulled out his phone. 3 days ago, an anonymous whistleblower sent this evidence to the FDA. Their preliminary investigation begins next week. Bradford's composure finally cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your sources at the FDA. An inquiry team has already been assembled. Kane circled the old workbench. But there's still time to manage this situation. That's why I'm here. What do you want? Bradford asked, his voice hardening. A merger. Altura absorbs Radiant. I become COO, and together we announced that during the combination of our research, we discovered the side effect issues and are already working on a solution. Bradford laughed bitterly. You destroy my company, then propose to save it by making yourself my second in command? Your arrogance is breathtaking. Not arrogance, pragmatism, Kane corrected. The alternative is both our companies collapse when the FDA findings become public. This way we both survive. And Elizabeth? Bradford asked quietly. Does she survive in this scenario? Or do you continue to pretend you had nothing to do with her death? Kane's expression darkened. Elizabeth died because you were too obsessed with your work to join her that day. If you had been on that boat instead of me. If I had been on that boat, she'd still be alive. Bradford's control finally shattered. You were drunk, Victor. The investigation covered it up because your father paid off the medical examiner, but I know the truth. In Cole's earpiece, Dominic's voice was urgent. Cole, I've just intercepted communications. Bradford has a secondary team outside. For armed men. Cole checked the surveillance feeds on his tablet. Confirmed. He's planning to eliminate Kane tonight. Inside the lab, the confrontation continued to escalate. You have until morning to accept my merger proposal, Kane stated. After that, the FDA gets the complete evidence package, including communications showing you were aware of the problems. Bradford's laugh held no humor. You won't live to see morning, Victor. Kane's eyes widened as he recognized the threat. You brought security? We agreed to come alone. I agreed to nothing, Bradford replied coldly. How appropriate that it ends where it began. Cole made a split-second decision and activated the building's old fire alarm system. The sudden blaring caused both men to flinch. What the hell? Kane glanced around wildly. Bradford cursed. Someone else is here. As both men moved toward the exits, Cole transmitted orders to Dominic, deploy countermeasures, and contact the FDA anonymously with everything we've gathered, Bradford's data manipulation, the offshore accounts, and his plan to eliminate Kane. The chaos that followed unfolded with precise choreography. As Bradford's security team rushed the building, they triggered the non-lethal traps Cole had set. Simultaneously, local police responded to an anonymous tip about armed men at the abandoned facility. Bradford and Kane were separated in the confusion, each escaping by different routes. Directly into surveillance that captured their panicked phone calls ordering document destruction and hasty evacuations. By midnight, Cole sat in a secured office at Altura, watching news reports of the unfolding scandal. The FDA had announced an emergency investigation into both pharmaceutical companies. Bradford's offshore financial transfers had been flagged by regulatory authorities. And most damaging of all, the full history of Bradford and Kane's deadly rivalry had been leaked to the press, including new evidence suggesting Elizabeth's death may not have been entirely accidental. Tessa burst into his office without knocking, her face pale with shock. "Did you know?" she demanded. "Did you know what Bradford was doing with the trial data?" Cole regarded her calmly. "I discovered it, yes. The FDA is shutting us down pending investigation. The IPO is canceled. Everyone's stock options are worthless." Tessa ran her hands through her hair. "My entire career is in ruins." "Much like my marriage," Cole observed mildly. Tessa stared at him, realization dawning. "You did this. All of it. Bradford hired you to stop a security threat, but you brought everything crashing down instead." "Bradford hired me because he thought he could control me," Cole corrected. "He thought my anger over your affair would make me a useful weapon against Kane." He was right about the weapon part, but wrong about who would be targeted. "You destroyed Altura. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs. People who had nothing to do with any of this." "The research will survive," Cole countered. "The FDA won't discard a promising cardiac medication. They'll simply ensure it's properly tested and that patients are correctly warned about potential side effects. A more ethical pharmaceutical company will acquire the assets." "And me? What happens to me in your revenge plan?" Tessa asked quietly. Cole stood. "You get exactly what you earned, Tessa. No more, no less. Meaning, I've provided federal investigators with a complete record of your involvement and non-involvement in Bradford's data manipulation. Unlike some, I don't believe in collective punishment. You'll face scrutiny, but likely emerge with your professional credentials intact." Cole gathered his tablet. "Your personal reputation is another matter entirely." Before Tessa could respond, Cole's phone buzzed. It was Dominic. "Bradford's private jet just filed a flight plan for Zurich," Dominic reported. "Departure in 90 minutes. Right on schedule," Cole noted. "Activate the final protocol." Tessa watched him, confusion evident on her face. "What final protocol?" Bradford's contingency plan was always to flee with his offshore millions if things went sideways, Cole explained. But fleeing requires a clear exit path. On cue, Cole's tablet displayed a breaking news update. Pharmaceutical CEO Bradford Reeves named in criminal complaint. Assets frozen worldwide. Tessa sank into a chair. "This is so much bigger than an affair or a public humiliation." "Why, Cole? What does any of this actually gain you?" "Justice," Cole replied simply. "Bradford used you to get to me. He used both of us in his war against Kane. He was willing to endanger patients' lives for profit, and he believed that wealth and power would protect him from consequences." Cole moved toward the door. "I need to go. I have one final meeting tonight." "With who?" Cole paused. "My parents." Chapter 8. Sins of the Father. The elegant restaurant overlooking the harbor had been Gregory and Diane Harrington's favorite for decades. Cole arrived precisely on time, observing his parents through the window before entering. They sat at their regular table, his father impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite being retired for 5 years, his mother wearing her signature pearls, both of them radiating the polished confidence of people accustomed to respect and deference. "Cole, darling." His mother greeted him with an air kiss as he approached. "We were surprised to get your invitation, especially given the circumstances." "Son," his father acknowledged with a curt nod. "Quite the scandal you're caught up in. It's all over the news." Cole took his seat, noticing how his father had chosen the word caught rather than created or exposed. "I thought we should talk," Cole said simply. "Face to face, given everything that's happened." A sensible approach, his mother approved, sipping her martini. "Though I must say, your handling of the situation with Tessa seems rather extreme. Marriages hit rough patches, dear. Public scenes and corporate takedowns aren't how responsible adults resolve their problems." Cole studied his mother, seeing the calculation behind her concern. "You've spoken with Tessa recently?" "Of course we have," his father interjected. "She's distraught. Her career is in shambles. And instead of working through your marital issues privately, you've chosen to burn everything to the ground." "Interesting perspective," Cole noted. "When did loyalty to Tessa outweigh loyalty to your son?" Diane Harrington set down her glass with a sharp click. "That's unfair, Cole. We've always supported you." "Have you?" Cole asked mildly. "At the party, when Tessa publicly humiliated me, you laughed along. When she handed me scraps while serving everyone else a gourmet meal, you nodded in approval. She was under tremendous pressure," his mother explained dismissively. "Everyone says things they regret at times." "What she said wasn't the issue. It was that you endorsed it," Cole replied. "But then, you've always held Tessa in higher regard than me, haven't you?" His father's expression hardened. "That's absurd. We've always been proud of your accomplishments." "My accomplishments, perhaps, but never my choices," Cole countered. "You wanted a son who would follow the traditional path: law school, corporate ladder, country club membership. Instead, you got someone who built something innovative from nothing. And look where that's led," his father retorted. "Your company is successful, yes, but this vendetta against Bradford Reeves and Altura Pharmaceuticals will have repercussions. The business community has a long memory, Cole." Cole leaned forward. "You're concerned about repercussions to my reputation, but not about what was done to me? Interesting priorities." His mother reached across the table, her expression softening into practiced concern. "Darling, we only want what's best for you. This destructive behavior isn't healthy. Tessa made a mistake, certainly, but destroying her career and taking down an entire company in revenge won't heal what's broken between you." "Nothing between Tessa and me can be healed," Cole replied firmly. "But this isn't about revenge. It's about consequences." "Same thing, different name," his father muttered. "No," Cole shook his head. "Revenge is emotional. Consequences are logical outcomes of choices made. Tessa chose to have an affair with Bradford. Bradford chose to manipulate clinical trial data and endanger patients. Both of them chose to humiliate me publicly. Now, they're experiencing the consequences of those choices." His father's eyes narrowed. "And what about our choices? Are we experiencing consequences too? Is that what this dinner is about?" Cole met his gaze steadily. "Yes." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. His mother broke it with a nervous laugh. "Really, Cole, you're being melodramatic. We're your parents. We've supported you your entire life." "Have you?" Cole asked again. "Let's test that theory. When I started Nexus Security, who invested in my company? Not you. You called it a risky diversion from a proper career path. When I developed the encryption protocol that eventually sold to the Department of Defense, who celebrated that achievement? Not you. You were too busy attending galas with Tessa's pharmaceutical colleagues. We were allowing you to stand on your own feet," his father insisted. "Not coddling you like so many parents do these days." "Coddling and basic support are very different things," Cole observed. "But the past is merely context. Let's focus on recent events. After the party, after Tessa's public humiliation, After discovering her affair with Bradford, did either of you call to check on me? To ask how I was doing? To offer any support whatsoever? His parents exchanged glances. We thought you needed space, his mother offered weakly. No. You called to remind me how much my career had benefited from Tessa's connections and to suggest I consider the practical aspects of reconciliation. Cole's voice remained calm, but took on a steely edge. You prioritize my connection to Altura over my dignity and emotional well-being. You chose Tessa's career over your son's heart. That's a gross mischaracterization, his father protested. Is it? Cole removed a small recorder from his pocket and placed it on the table. Let's review, shall we? He pressed play, and his mother's voice emerged clearly. Cole, darling, I understand you're upset about Tessa's indiscretion, but you need to think practically. Your security contracts with Altura have been the cornerstone of your business growth. A divorce would jeopardize all of that. Sometimes in marriage, we must overlook certain disappointments. Cole stopped the recording. Would you like to hear what you said next, Dad? About how I should man up and handle this discreetly, because Bradford Reeves is not someone you want as an enemy? His father's face had reddened with anger. Recording your parents without consent? That's a new low, even for you. Interesting that your concern is about the recording, not about what you actually said, Cole noted. But don't worry, I didn't record that conversation illegally. My home office, where you called me, has always had security monitoring. There's a disclosure statement in the entryway of my house. You've walked past it hundreds of times. His mother's carefully maintained composure was beginning to crack. What exactly is the point of all this, Cole? To make us feel guilty? To punish us for not reacting exactly as you wanted? No, Cole replied simply. The point is to inform you of changes going forward. I've spent my life seeking approval from parents who consistently prioritized appearances over authenticity and others' success over my well-being. That ends today. What does that mean? His father demanded. It means our relationship will reflect the loyalty you've demonstrated. Cole's voice remained steady. I won't be attending family gatherings where Tessa is welcome. I won't be contributing to the family foundation that bears your name, but relies primarily on my donations. And I won't be maintaining the fiction that we're a close, supportive family when the evidence clearly suggests otherwise. This is childish, his father scoffed. You're punishing us because we didn't coddle you through a marital spat. No, I'm establishing boundaries based on observed behavior. Cole stood. You show me exactly where your loyalties lie. I'm simply adjusting my expectations accordingly. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Whether genuine or tactical, Cole couldn't be certain. Cole, please. We're family. Whatever mistakes we've made, surely we can work through them. Perhaps, in time, Cole acknowledged. But that process begins with honest recognition of those mistakes, not dismissing them as my overreaction. As Cole prepared to leave, his father grabbed his arm. You'll regret this approach, son. When this scandal with Bradford and Altura blows over, you'll find yourself isolated. No wife, strained relationship with your parents. Is that really what you want? Cole gently removed his father's hand. What I want is authentic relationships based on mutual respect and loyalty. If that means a smaller circle, so be it. And your revenge against Bradford and Tessa? Has that given you the satisfaction you sought? His father asked bitterly. It was never about satisfaction, Cole replied. It was about justice. Bradford's patients deserved safety. His employees deserved honest leadership. And I deserved better than what Tessa and you offered. He stepped back from the table. Goodbye, Dad. Mom, take care of yourselves. As Cole walked through the restaurant, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Former Altura Pharmaceuticals EVP Tessa Harrington to testify against CEO Bradford Reeves in exchange for immunity. Cole smiled slightly. Tessa had always been a survivor. Outside, Dominic waited in the car. How did it go? Exactly as expected, Cole replied, sliding into the passenger seat. What's our status with Nexus Security? The government contracts are secured, and our private client list is growing since the Altura expose, Dominic reported. The business world is divided. Some think you're a corporate vigilante. Others see you as a necessary correction mechanism. Either way, our security services are in high demand. And Bradford? Under house arrest, pending trial. His assets remain frozen. The evidence you provided to federal investigators was comprehensive. Cole nodded, watching the city lights reflect off the harbor waters as they drove. And the final package for Tessa? Dominic hesitated. Delivered to her attorney this morning. All evidence of her non-involvement in the data falsification, plus documentation of Bradford's plan to frame her if the problems became public. He glanced at Cole. She'll likely avoid criminal charges, though her professional reputation is entirely her responsibility to rebuild, Cole finished. I ensured she wouldn't pay for crimes she didn't commit. The rest is up to her. And your parents? Cole's expression remained neutral. They made their choice. Now they live with it. As they approached Cole's house, recently redecorated and purged of all reminders of his former life, Dominic asked the question that had been lingering between them. Was it worth it, Cole? All of this? Cole considered the question carefully. It wasn't about worth. It was about principle. Some people believe they can act without consequences, that money or power or family ties will shield them from the results of their choices. He gazed at the city below. They're wrong. Chapter 9. Ashes and Rebirth. 1 year later, the new headquarters of Nexus Security Solutions dominated the downtown skyline, its glass and steel structure reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside his top-floor office, Cole Harrington reviewed the quarterly reports with satisfaction. The company had tripled in size since the Altura pharmaceutical scandal, with government contracts and private security consultations generating unprecedented revenue. Dominic entered without knocking, their years of friendship having dissolved such formalities long ago. The Westridge evaluation is complete, he announced. Their security protocols were even worse than we anticipated. Full reports on your server. Cole nodded. And the other matter? Just as you predicted. Dominic handed him a tablet displaying a news article. Bradford's plea deal went through. 8 years, reduced to 5 with cooperation. The CardioFix formula has been acquired by Meridian Pharmaceuticals, with all safety issues properly documented and addressed. Any word on Tessa's involvement with Meridian? Consultant only, not executive staff. Her testimony against Bradford salvaged her professional credentials, but the industry memory is long. She won't hold a leadership position again anytime soon. Cole handed back the tablet. And my parents? Dominic hesitated. They've reached out again. 3 calls this week to your personal line, which continues to go directly to voicemail, Cole noted without emotion. They sent a formal letter too, Dominic added, placing an envelope on the desk. Your father's law firm letterhead. Cole stared at the envelope without touching it. Probably another attempt at reconciliation on their terms. Probably, Dominic agreed. Though it's been a year. People can change. They can, Cole acknowledged. But typically only when the consequences of not changing become too uncomfortable to bear. He finally picked up the envelope. I'll read it later. Their conversation was interrupted by Cole's assistant, Riley. Mr. Harrington, your 10 o'clock is here. Dr. Lauren Mercer from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Cole straightened his tie. Send her in. Dr. Mercer entered. A striking woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing. Unlike Tessa's carefully calculated professionalism, Lauren Mercer's demeanor suggested authentic competence rather than ambition. Mr. Harrington, she greeted him, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting with me directly. Most security firms would have sent a sales team. Nexus isn't most security firms, Cole replied, gesturing for her sit. And Meridian's acquisition of the CardioFix formula makes your security needs unique. Lauren nodded. That's precisely why I wanted to meet you personally. Your role in exposing the data manipulation at Altura demonstrated not just technical expertise, but ethical commitment. She leaned forward. We're rebuilding public trust in a medication that can save lives, but only if patients can be confident in its safety profile. That requires absolute data integrity. I understand completely, Cole assured her. Dominic, can you walk Dr. Mercer through our preliminary security assessment for pharmaceutical research protocols? As Dominic began the presentation, Cole observed the interaction with interest. Throughout the scandal and its aftermath, he had maintained his professional focus, channeling his personal disappointment into building Nexus into an industry leader. The meeting proceeded efficiently, with Lauren asking incisive questions that revealed both technical knowledge and genuine concern for patient welfare. By its conclusion, Meridian had contracted Nexus for a comprehensive security overhaul. "One last question, Mr. Harrington," Lauren said as she prepared to leave. "Given your history with Altura, I have to ask, are you comfortable working with a company that employs Tessa Harrington, even in a consulting capacity?" "My issues with my ex-wife were personal, not professional," Cole replied evenly. "And my focus has always been on patient safety and data integrity. If Tessa's expertise contributes to those goals at Meridian, I have no objection." Lauren seemed satisfied with his answer. "I appreciated your direct approach. Perhaps we could continue this discussion over dinner sometime? Purely professional, of course." The invitation caught Cole by surprise, though he didn't show it. "I'd be interested in that, Dr. Mercer." "Lauren, please," she corrected with a smile. "I'll have my assistant contact yours for scheduling." After she left, Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Purely professional? Probably not," Cole admitted with the ghost of a smile. "But a year is a long time to focus exclusively on work." Later that evening, Cole sat alone in his home office, Bradford's unopened letter from his parents still on his desk. Finally, he slit the envelope open and read. "Cole, a year has passed since our last conversation. In that time, we've had ample opportunity to reflect on our failures, not as professionals or as social fixtures, but as parents. Your mother and I have spent our lives prioritizing appearances over authenticity. We valued others' perceptions more than our son's well-being. When you needed our support most, we instead calculated the social and professional advantages of maintaining connections to people who had betrayed you. There is no justification for these choices, only recognition of their fundamental wrongness. We do not expect forgiveness. We have not earned it. But we would ask for an opportunity to demonstrate that even late in life, people can recognize their failures and attempt to become better. Whether you choose to respond or not, know this. We are proud of the man you have become, not despite our absence of support, but in defiance of it. Your strength of character and commitment to principle revealed the poverty of our own. With genuine regret and hope, your father." Cole read the letter twice, testing each word for sincerity versus strategy. His father, the consummate lawyer, had always been skilled at crafting convincing arguments. It's something in the phrasing suggested authentic reflection rather than tactical maneuvering. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then set it down again. Forgiveness, like trust, couldn't be manufactured or accelerated. If his parents had truly recognized their failures, they would understand that rebuilding a relationship required patience and consistency, not just a well-worded letter. Instead, Cole opened his laptop and began composing an email to Lauren Mercer, suggesting a date for their dinner. The past year had taught him valuable lessons about loyalty, betrayal, and consequences. But perhaps the most important lesson was that moving forward required selective forgiveness, not for others' benefit, but for his own. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Altura EVP Tessa Harrington submits resignation from Meridian Pharmaceuticals' consulting position. Sources suggest international relocation. Cole read the headline without surprise. Tessa had always been adept at recognizing when a situation no longer served her interests. Her departure from Meridian, and possibly the country, represented the final severance of their intertwined lives. He closed the news alert and returned to his email to Lauren. The future beckoned, not with the naive optimism of his younger self, but with the hard-won wisdom of someone who understood that true strength came not from avoiding pain, but from transforming it into purpose. Outside his window, the city lights glimmered like stars fallen to earth, countless lives intersecting, separating, colliding in patterns of consequence and choice. Cole had navigated his own pattern with unflinching resolve, emerging not unscathed but unbowed. In the end, the price of humiliation had been paid in full, not just by those who had inflicted it, but by everyone who had enabled or endorsed it. Justice, Cole had discovered, was not merely punitive but restorative, clearing the path for whatever came next. And something was coming next. Of that, at least he was certain. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Revelation. Blake Sullivan pushed his cart through the produce section of Westfield Market, methodically checking items off his wife's grocery list. At 42, he was a man of routine and precision, traits that had served him well in his career as a forensic accountant and made him an invaluable asset to law enforcement agencies nationwide. His sharp green eyes missed nothing, a skill that had exposed countless financial crimes over his 15-year career. The Saturday afternoon crowd buzzed around him as he selected organic apples, exactly as Cheryl had specified. After 14 years of marriage, he'd learned to follow her list to the letter to avoid the inevitable arguments that came with deviating from her meticulous plans. "Daddy!" The word pierced through the ambient noise like a gunshot. Blake turned to see a little girl, perhaps 5 years old, running toward him with arms outstretched. Before he could react, small arms wrapped around his legs in an enthusiastic embrace. "Daddy, you came back." The child's voice was filled with pure joy as she buried her face against his jeans. Blake gently but firmly placed his hands on the girl's shoulders, carefully creating distance between them. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not your father." The little girl looked up at him with enormous brown eyes that held a familiar depth that made his stomach clench unexpectedly. Her dark hair was pulled into pigtails, and she wore a pink dress with cartoon characters. Something about her features nagged at the back of his mind, but he couldn't place it. "But you look just like Daddy," she insisted, her lower lip beginning to tremble. Sophia, where are you?" A woman's voice called frantically from the next aisle. Blake's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice, had heard it call his name in passion and anger for over a decade. But it wasn't calling for him now. Cheryl Sullivan rounded the corner, her perfectly styled blonde hair slightly disheveled, her blue eyes scanning desperately until they landed on the scene before her. The color drained from her face as if someone had pulled a plug, leaving her looking ghostly pale. For a moment, time stood suspended. Blake stared at his wife, then down at the little girl who was still clinging to his legs, then back at Cheryl. The resemblance was undeniable now that he saw them together. This child had Cheryl's nose, her chin, but those eyes. "It's her," Cheryl whispered into her phone, which Blake now noticed was pressed to her ear. "He's here. Close the exits." The words hit Blake like physical blows. The methodical mind that had unraveled countless deceptions began processing the implications with devastating clarity. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity by a confused child. This little girl knew him, or rather, knew someone who looked exactly like him. Security guards appeared from multiple directions, moving with practiced efficiency to block the store's exits. Blake remained perfectly still, his hands still resting gently on Sophia's shoulders as his world imploded around him. "Cheryl," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same deadly calm he used when confronting embezzlers in court. "I think we need to talk." His wife's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. In her eyes, Blake saw guilt, fear, and something else, calculation. She was already working angles, already planning her next move. "Blake, I can explain." "Can you?" His voice remained perfectly level, but those who knew him well would have recognized the danger in that tone. "Can you explain why this little girl thinks I'm her father? Can you explain why you're having store security lock down the exits?" Sophia looked between the two adults, confusion replacing her initial joy. "Mommy? Why is Daddy acting weird? Why won't he come home?" The words were a dagger to Blake's heart, not because of any affection for this child, but because of what they represented. Years of lies, years of betrayal, years of his wife playing him for a fool while living a double life. "Sir," one of the security guards approached cautiously. We're going to need you to come with us to the office while we sort this out. Blake looked at the guard, a young man, probably in his 20s, trying to do his job without fully understanding the situation he'd walked into. Of course, though I should mention that my wife seems to have some explaining to do about why she thought it was necessary to trap me in a grocery store. As they walked toward the security office, Blake's mind was already working. 14 years of marriage. No children despite his desire for a family. Cheryl had always claimed fertility issues, insisted they keep trying naturally instead of seeking medical intervention. How long had she been lying? How long had she been living this other life? But more importantly, who was the father? Because if this little girl thought Blake was her daddy, then there was someone out there who looked enough like him to fool a child. Someone who had been sharing his wife's bed while Blake worked late nights, traveling for cases, trusting completely in the woman he'd pledged his life to. In the security office, Blake sat across from his wife and watched her fidget with her wedding ring, a nervous habit he'd noticed but never questioned. Now he wondered how many other signs he'd missed, how many clues his trained eye had overlooked because he'd never thought to look for deception in his own home. How long? He asked simply. Cheryl's eyes darted to the security guard, who was pretending to busy himself with paperwork while clearly listening to every word. Blake, please, not here. Let's go home and discuss this privately. No. The word was final, absolute. How long, Cheryl? How long have you been lying to me? She broke then, tears streaming down her face in a display that might have moved him once, but now only disgusted him. 6 years. It's been 6 years, but Blake, you have to understand. 6 years. Blake repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. 6 years of deception. 6 years of betrayal. 6 years of making a fool of him while he supported her, loved her, remained faithful to her. The security guard cleared his throat. If there's no actual security threat here, maybe you folks should take this conversation somewhere more private. Blake stood, his movements controlled and deliberate. You're absolutely right. Cheryl, we're going home. You're going to tell me everything. And then you're going to help me understand why I shouldn't destroy you and whoever you've been sleeping with. As they left the store, Blake caught sight of little Sophia being consoled by an older woman, probably a grandmother or babysitter. The child was crying, asking why her daddy wouldn't come home. Blake felt no sympathy for the child's confusion. In his mind, there were only two types of people in the world, those who could be trusted and those who had betrayed that trust. Cheryl had just revealed herself to be the latter, and in Blake's unforgiving worldview, that made her, and anyone who had helped deceive him, an enemy to be dealt with accordingly. The drive home was silent except for Cheryl's occasional sniffles. Blake's hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled force as he planned his next moves. His wife had made the mistake of betraying a man who made his living exposing lies and holding people accountable for their deceptions. She was about to learn that Blake Sullivan never forgave and he never forgot. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The Sullivan house sat on 2 acres of meticulously maintained property in Westfield's most exclusive neighborhood. Blake had bought it 5 years ago as a symbol of their success, his growing reputation as the go-to forensic accountant for high-profile cases and Cheryl's boutique consulting business. Now, as he pulled into the circular driveway, the house felt like a monument to his own naivety. Inside, Cheryl immediately headed for the wine cabinet, her hands trembling as she poured herself a generous glass of Chardonnay. Blake remained standing, his arms crossed, watching her every movement with the same intensity he brought to analyzing financial records. Start talking, he said. Cheryl took a large gulp of wine before speaking. His name is Ian Snell. He's a contractor. He renovated the Marriott downtown about 6 years ago. I was handling their interior design consultation. Blake's mind immediately began cataloging details. Ian Snell, contractor. 6 years ago would have been when Blake was traveling extensively for the Henderson embezzlement case, sometimes gone for weeks at a time. Physical resemblance, Blake said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Cheryl's voice was barely a whisper. Same height, same build, same coloring. Even our friends have commented on it when they've seen him around town. Around town. Blake's voice was dangerously quiet. He lives here? In Westfield. He moved here about 4 years ago. Bought a house on Elm Street. She took another drink. Blake, you have to understand, it wasn't supposed to happen. I was lonely. You were always working. Don't. The word cut through her excuse like a blade. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. You made a choice. Multiple choices. For 6 years. Blake began pacing, his mind working through timelines and implications. The fertility issues. The doctor visits you always went to alone. The business trips you started taking 2 years ago. Each statement was met with Cheryl's guilty silence, confirming what Blake already knew. There had been no fertility issues, at least not on his part. The doctor visits had likely been prenatal appointments. The business trips had been opportunities to play house with Ian Snell and their daughter. What do you tell Sophia I am when I'm not around? Blake asked. We told her you travel for work, that you're away a lot, but you love her very much. Cheryl's voice broke on the last words. Blake stopped pacing and stared at his wife with undisguised contempt. So not only have you been lying to me for 6 years, you've been lying to a child about her father's identity. You've made me into some absent deadbeat dad in her mind. It's not like that. What's it like, Cheryl? Explain to me what it's like to live a double life for 6 years. Explain to me what it's like to look me in the eye every morning and lie. Explain to me what it's like to sleep next to me while carrying another man's child. Cheryl was crying openly now, but Blake felt nothing but cold fury. His wife had revealed herself to be someone he'd never known. A manipulator, a liar, someone capable of maintaining the most fundamental deception possible. I want to know everything, Blake said. Every detail. Where you meet, how often, what story you've told him about me. Everything. Blake, please. Everything, Cheryl. Because you have 2 choices right now. You can tell me everything voluntarily, or I can find it out myself. And I think we both know I'm very good at finding things out. The threat was clear. Blake's reputation for uncovering hidden assets and secret transactions was legendary in law enforcement circles. Financial infidelity was child's play compared to what he'd exposed in federal court. Cheryl must have recognized the futility of continued lies because she began talking. The affair had started during a business dinner. Ian had pursued her aggressively, and she'd been flattered by the attention from a man who looked so much like Blake, but seemed more attentive, more present. He doesn't know about you, Cheryl admitted. I mean, he knows I'm married, but I told him we were separated, that you were emotionally abusive and that I was planning to divorce you, but was afraid of the financial implications. Blake's laugh was harsh and humorless. Emotionally abusive. That's rich. What else did you tell him about me? That you were controlling. That you monitored my spending and isolated me from friends. That you threatened me when I talked about leaving. Each lie felt like another wound, but Blake's anger was crystallizing into something colder and more dangerous. Calculation. So Ian Snell thinks he's the knight in shining armor, rescuing the poor abused wife from her terrible husband. Something like that. And Sophia? What does she know about our living arrangement? We told her that mommy and daddy can't live together right now because of work, but that we love her very much. When she asks why you don't visit more, I tell her you're busy with important business trips. Blake resumed pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. Ian Snell thought he was the hero in this story. Sophia thought Blake was her absent but loving father. And Cheryl had crafted an elaborate fiction that painted Blake as the villain while positioning herself as the victim. Where do they live? Blake asked. Ian's house on Elm Street. Sophia stays there most of the time, but she has her own room at my apartment. Your apartment? Blake's voice was deadly quiet. What apartment, Cheryl? His wife looked up with wide, frightened eyes. The one on Maple Street. I rented it 3 years ago for when I needed space. Blake felt the final pieces of his marriage crumbling around him. You've been maintaining 2 households, playing the devoted wife here while playing house with your lover and daughter across town. Blake, I never meant for it to go this far. It evolved. It evolved. Blake tested the words. 6 years of lying evolved. Creating a child with another man evolved. Building an entire false life evolved. He stopped in front of Cheryl, looking down at her with the same expression he wore when confronting criminals in court. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every detail about Ian Snell, where he works, what projects he's on, what his schedule looks like. You're going to tell me about the apartment, the finances, how you've been paying for this double life. What are you going to do? Blake's smile was cold and predatory. I'm going to do what I do best, Cheryl. I'm going to find out exactly who Ian Snell is, and then I'm going to destroy both of you. Completely. Methodically. And by the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard my name. Blake, please think about Sophia. She's just a child. Sophia is not my concern. You made sure of that when you spent 6 years letting her believe I was her absent father. You want to protect her? You should have thought about that before you decided to build her entire life on a foundation of lies. Blake grabbed his keys from the kitchen counter. I'm going to a hotel tonight. You're going to stay here and write down everything, every detail about your relationship with Ian, every lie you've told, every financial arrangement you've made. When I come back tomorrow, we're going to plan exactly how this is going to end. As he headed for the door, Cheryl called out desperately, Blake, can we work this out? Can we go to counseling? Blake paused at the door without turning around. Cheryl, there are only 2 types of people in this world. Those who can be trusted and those who betray that trust. You show me exactly which type you are. And I've never forgiven a betrayal in my life. I'm not about to start now. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a final judgment. Chapter 3. The Investigation. Blake checked into the Westfield Marriott, the same hotel where his wife had first met her lover 6 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him as he set up his laptop in the suite and began what he did best, following the money and uncovering the truth. His first call was to Tommy Williams, a private investigator he'd worked with on several federal cases. Tommy specialized in background investigations and surveillance, and he owed Blake several favors. Tommy, I need a complete workup on someone. Everything you can find. Name is Ian Snell, contractor, lives on Elm Street in Westfield. I need it fast, and I need it thorough. Personal or professional? Tommy asked. Very personal. And Tommy? This stays between us. Understood. Give me 48 hours. Blake's next call was to his accountant and longtime friend, Charles Gonzalez. Charles, I need you to audit my personal finances for the last 6 years. Every account, every transaction. I'm looking for unexplained expenditures, hidden accounts, anything that doesn't fit normal patterns. Blake, is everything okay? Everything is about to be much better. How quickly can you have this done? If I drop everything else? 2 days. Drop everything else. Blake spent the rest of the evening accessing public records from his laptop. Ian Snell, age 38, born in Denver, moved to Westfield 4 years ago. He owned Snell Construction, a mid-sized operation that specialized in commercial renovations. The business appeared legitimate and successful, with several high-profile projects around the state. Property records showed Ian had purchased the house on Elm Street for $450,000 cash 4 years ago. Interesting for a contractor, but not impossible if business was good. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial on a quarter-acre lot, recently renovated with high-end finishes. Blake cross-referenced the timing of Ian's move to Westfield with Cheryl's credit card statements, which had access to through their joint accounts. Sure enough, charges at restaurants and hotels in the area had begun appearing around the same time. By midnight, Blake had constructed a timeline of the affair. It had started 6 years ago during the Marriott project. Sophia had been born 5 years ago, making her conception occur approximately 3 months into the affair. Ian had moved to Westfield when the child was 1, suggesting the relationship had become serious enough for him to relocate his business. Blake's phone buzzed with a text from Cheryl. I wrote everything down like you asked. Please call me. We need to talk. He deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow would be soon enough to review his wife's confession. Tonight, he had more research to do. Blake accessed the state licensing board database and pulled Ian's contractor license information. Clean record, no complaints, properly bonded and insured. He searched court records for any litigation involving Ian or his business. Nothing significant, just a few minor contract disputes that had been settled out of court. Social media revealed more personal details. Ian's Facebook page showed a man who looked remarkably similar to Blake. Same dark hair, same build, same general features. But where Blake was methodical and controlled, Ian appeared more carefree, posting photos of hiking trips, brewery visits, and construction projects. More importantly, the photos showed Ian with a little girl who was unmistakably Sophia. In the pictures, they were at parks, at the beach, at children's events. The photos were captioned with things like Daddy-Daughter Day and My Little Princess. Ian clearly believed he was Sophia's father and was apparently devoted to the role. Blake found Cheryl in several of the more recent photos, though she was tagged as Sophie's mom rather than by name. The photos showed a happy family: Ian, Cheryl, and Sophia at birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and casual outings. The sight of these images filled Blake with cold rage. While he'd been working to build their future, Cheryl had been building an entirely different life with another man. She'd been playing wife and mother in Ian's world while maintaining the facade of marriage in Blake's. A deeper dive into Ian's business revealed he'd been awarded several significant contracts over the past 4 years, including a $2.3 million courthouse renovation and a $1.8 million hospital expansion. For a contractor who'd relocated from out of state, Ian had built an impressive client base remarkably quickly. Blake made a note to investigate how Ian had secured these contracts. In his experience, rapid success in a new market often involved connections, referrals, or other forms of assistance that might prove useful leverage. His phone rang at 1:30 a.m. Cheryl's name appeared on the screen. Blake let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful message asking him to come home so they could work things out. He deleted that message as well. By 3 a.m., Blake had compiled a comprehensive initial profile of Ian Snell. The man appeared to be exactly what he claimed: a successful contractor who'd built a good life in Westfield. He seemed to genuinely love Sophia and believe she was his daughter. He had no criminal record, no apparent financial problems, and no obvious weaknesses. That would have to change. Blake's expertise wasn't just in finding hidden assets or exposing financial crimes. His real talent was understanding human nature, finding the pressure points that made people make mistakes, and then exploiting those mistakes with surgical precision. Ian Snell thought he was living a happy life with his girlfriend and daughter. He had no idea that the woman he loved was actually married to someone else, that the child he adored was being raised on a foundation of lies, or that the man whose identity Cheryl had destroyed in order to make Ian feel like a hero was about to make his existence a living hell. Blake opened a new document on his laptop and began typing. Operation Disclosure: a systematic plan for exposing the true nature of Cheryl Sullivan and Ian Snell while ensuring maximum consequences for their 6 years of deception. He worked until dawn, outlining a strategy that would methodically destroy both their relationship and their individual lives. By the time the sun rose over Westfield, Blake had crafted a plan that would make his betrayers wish they'd never been born. But first, he needed more information, and Tommy Williams would be calling soon with details that would help Blake understand exactly what kind of man Ian Snell really was beneath the surface. Blake smiled as he closed his laptop. His wife had made the mistake of betraying someone who never forgave and never forgot. She was about to learn that some mistakes have consequences that last a lifetime. Chapter 4: The Web Titans. Tommy Williams called at exactly 8 a.m. with news that made Blake's predatory smile widen. "Your guy Ian Snell is interesting," Tommy said. "Clean on the surface, but I found some things that don't quite add up." "I'm listening." "First, the cash purchase of his house 4 years ago. The money came from a business account, but it was a lot of cash for a construction company to have liquid. Most contractors are always leveraged." Blake made notes as Tommy continued. "Second, I found records of him working under a different business name in Denver, Mountain View Construction. That company dissolved right before he moved to Westfield, and there were some unhappy creditors left behind." "How unhappy?" "Unhappy enough that 3 different contractors filed liens against properties Mountain View was working on. Ian dissolved the company and disappeared to Westfield before any of them could collect." Blake felt the familiar thrill of discovering leverage. So he stiffed his subcontractors and fled to start fresh. "Looks like it. But here's the really interesting part. I talked to one of those creditors, a guy named Dale Knox. He's been looking for Ian for 4 years, claims Ian owes him $60,000 for electrical work. Is Dale Knox still interested in collecting? Very interested, and he's got documentation proving the debt. Blake made another note. A creditor with a grudge and legal documentation was exactly the kind of pressure point he could exploit. What else? Ian's been dating your wife openly around town for at least 2 years. They've been seen at restaurants, community events, even parent-teacher conferences at the elementary school. As far as anyone knows, they're just a normal couple with a kid. Parent-teacher conferences, Blake repeated slowly. So Sophia is enrolled in school under what name? Sophia Snell. Ian is listed as her father on all school records. The implications hit Blake immediately. Ian had been claiming Sophia as his dependent for tax purposes, probably receiving child tax credits and deductions for a child who wasn't legally his. Meanwhile, Blake had been claiming no dependents because Cheryl had insisted they weren't ready for children. Tommy, I need you to dig deeper into Ian's financial records. Tax returns, bank statements, anything you can legally access. I also need surveillance on both Ian and Cheryl, schedules, routines, who they meet with. That's going to take more resources. Money is no object. And Tommy, I need you to reach out to Dale Knox. Tell him I might be able to help him collect what he's owed. After ending the call, Blake drove home to retrieve Cheryl's written confession. She met him at the door, looking haggard and desperate. Blake, thank God you're back. I've been thinking all night, and I know we can work this out. Where's what I asked you to write? Cheryl handed him a 10-page document. Blake scanned it quickly, noting key details. The affair had indeed started 6 years ago. Cheryl had been using a credit card Ian didn't know about to pay for her single mother apartment. She'd been telling Ian that Blake was emotionally abusive and that she was afraid to file for divorce because of his connections in law enforcement. You told him I was abusive, Blake said without looking up from the pages. I had to explain why I couldn't divorce you. He would have insisted on it otherwise. Blake finally looked at his wife. So you made me into the villain in your story. The controlling, abusive husband who keeps you trapped. It wasn't personal against you. It wasn't personal. Blake's voice was dangerously quiet. You turned the man my wife's daughter calls daddy against me by painting me as an abuser. You made me into a threat in their lives. How is that not personal? Cheryl seemed to realize she'd said something wrong. Blake, I'm sorry. I know how this looks. You have no idea how this looks. You have no idea what you've done or what's coming. Blake pocketed the confession and headed toward the door. Where are you going? To visit Ian Snell. I think it's time he learned the truth about the woman he's been living with. The drive to Elm Street took 15 minutes. Blake parked across from Ian's house and studied it carefully. The renovations were impressive. New windows, fresh paint, professional landscaping. A swing set in the backyard was visible through the fence, along with a small garden area that looked like something a child might help maintain. Ian's truck was in the driveway, a late model Ford F-250 with Snell Construction logos on the doors. Blake waited until he saw movement through the windows before approaching the front door. The man who answered could have been Blake's brother. The resemblance was so striking that Blake understood immediately how a 5-year-old could mistake them. Ian was perhaps an inch shorter and 20 pounds heavier, but the facial features, hair color, and build were remarkably similar. Can I help you? Ian asked, clearly confused by Blake's appearance. I'm Blake Sullivan, Blake said simply. I think we need to talk. Ian's face went through several expressions, confusion, recognition, then growing alarm. Cheryl said you were abusive? Controlling? A threat to you and Sophia. Blake's smile was cold. Yes, I imagine she did. May I come in? We have a lot to discuss. Ian stepped back, allowing Blake to enter. The house was well appointed, clearly the home of a successful man. Photos of Ian and Sophia covered the mantel, along with what appeared to be school artwork and sports certificates. Nice place, Blake said, examining a photo of Ian pushing Sophia on a swing. You've done well for yourself since leaving Denver. Ian's face paled. How do you know about Denver? I know quite a bit, Ian. I know about Mountain View Construction. I know about Dale Knox and the $60,000 you owe him. I know about the other creditors you left behind when you dissolved your company and fled to Westfield. I didn't flee. You abandoned your debts and started over with a new identity in a new town. Most people would call that fleeing. Blake sat down uninvited on Ian's couch. But I'm not here about your past business practices. I'm here about my wife. Your wife? Blake pulled out his phone and showed Ian their wedding photo. Cheryl Sullivan. We've been married for 14 years. We live together in a house on Oakwood Drive. She's never filed for divorce, Ian. She's not separated. She's been lying to both of us for 6 years. Ian stared at the photo, then at Blake, his mind clearly struggling to process the information. That's impossible. Cheryl and I, we live together. Sophia is my daughter. Sophia is not your daughter, Blake said gently. According to the timeline Cheryl provided me, you've been claiming another man's child as your own, taking tax benefits for her, enrolling her in school under your name. That's fraud, Ian. You're lying. Blake pulled out Cheryl's written confession and handed it to Ian. Read it yourself. All 10 pages. Every detail of how she's been playing us both. As Ian read, Blake watched the man's world crumble. The confusion turned to anger, then to devastation as the full scope of Cheryl's deception became clear. She said you were dangerous, Ian whispered. She said you threatened her. I've never threatened anyone in my personal life, Blake said. But I am dangerous, Ian. Just not in the way Cheryl told you. I'm dangerous because I never forgive people who betray me. And right now, I consider you complicit in that betrayal. Ian looked up from the confession, his eyes filled with pain and anger. I didn't know. I swear to God. I had no idea she was still married. But now you do know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Blake leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used when flipping witnesses in federal cases. Here's what I see, Ian. You're not a bad man. You were lied to and manipulated by someone who used your feelings against you. You genuinely love a child who isn't yours, and you've built a life based on deception. What do you want from me? Blake's smile was predatory. I want justice, Ian. And I think deep down, so do you. Cheryl has made fools of both of us. She's used your love for Sophia to control you, and she's used my trust to betray me. Don't you think it's time she faced consequences for that? Ian was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos of him and Sophia. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we work together to make sure Cheryl pays for what she's done. To both of us. Blake stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ian? Dale Knox will be contacting you soon about that $60,000 you owe him. I'd recommend taking care of that debt quickly. Prison time for fraud and theft would really complicate your life right now. As Blake reached the door, Ian called out, What about Sophia? She's innocent in all this. Blake turned back, his expression cold. Sophia is not my concern. She never was. Cheryl made sure of that when she spent 5 years letting her believe I was her absent father. If you want to protect her, you should have thought about that before you decided to build her life on a foundation of lies. Blake left Ian Snell sitting in his living room, surrounded by photos of a life that had just been revealed as an elaborate deception. The first domino had fallen. Soon, they would all come crashing down. Chapter 5, The Squeeze. Blake spent the next 3 days orchestrating a symphony of destruction. Charles Gonzalez's financial audit had revealed that Cheryl had been systematically siphoning money from their joint accounts to fund her double life. Small amounts, carefully spaced to avoid detection, but totaling nearly $75,000 over 4 years. More damaging was the discovery that Cheryl had been using Blake's social security number to co-sign for Ian's business loans, forging Blake's signature on documents that made him liable for over $300,000 in construction equipment financing. She'd used her position as Blake's wife to provide financial backing for her lover's business expansion. She's committed identity theft and fraud. Charles explained over lunch. You could press charges that would put her away for years. Not yet, Blake said. I want her to dig herself deeper first. Tommy Williams had also delivered results. Ian Snell's surveillance revealed a man struggling with a revelation about Cheryl. He'd been seen arguing with her in public, and neighbors reported shouting matches coming from the house on Elm Street. More importantly, Ian had contacted a family attorney, suggesting he was considering his legal options regarding Sophia. The relationship is fracturing, Tommy reported. Ian's questioning everything now. and Dale Knox is scheduled to arrive in Westfield tomorrow to collect his debt. Blake felt a familiar surge of satisfaction. His web was tightening exactly as planned. That evening, Blake returned to his house to find Cheryl waiting with divorce papers. "I've been thinking," she said, trying to project confidence. "Maybe it's better if we end this cleanly. I've spoken to an attorney, and we can split everything 50-50. You can keep the house, I'll keep my business, and we can both move on." Blake glanced at the papers without picking them up. "You want a clean divorce? It's the mature thing to do. We can avoid a messy court battle." Blake laughed, a harsh sound that made Cheryl flinch. "Cheryl, you've committed identity theft, fraud, and adultery. You've stolen $75,000 from our joint accounts and forged my signature on business loans worth $300,000. You want to discuss maturity?" Cheryl's confident facade cracked. "I don't know what you think you found. I know exactly what I found. The question is whether you want to handle this privately or whether you'd prefer I turn everything over to the district attorney." Blake walked to the kitchen and poured himself a drink, leaving Cheryl to contemplate his words. When he returned, she was pale and shaking. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want you to call Ian right now and tell him you're coming over. I want you to have a conversation with him about your future together." "Blake, please. Call him, Cheryl. Because if you don't, I'm calling the police instead." With trembling hands, Cheryl dialed Ian's number. Blake listened to her side of the conversation, noting how she tried to sound normal despite her obvious distress. "He wants to see me," she said after hanging up. "He says we need to talk about Sophia." "Perfect. I want you to go to him. I want you to try to salvage your relationship. And I want you to convince him that everything I told him was a lie." Cheryl looked confused. "Why would you want that?" Blake's smile was predatory. "Because I want to watch you try to hold together a relationship built on lies while your entire world collapses around you. I want Ian to see exactly who you really are when the pressure builds." An hour later, Blake parked across from Ian's house and watched through the front window as Cheryl argued with her lover. Even from a distance, it was clear the conversation wasn't going well. Ian kept pointing at documents, probably Cheryl's confession, while she gestured frantically, trying to explain or justify her actions. Blake's phone rang. "Dale Knox." "I'm in town," Dale said. "Just served Ian Snell with papers demanding payment of the $60,000 he owes me. He looked like he'd seen a ghost." "How did he respond?" "Said he needed time to gather the money. I told him he had until Friday or I'd file a criminal complaint for theft of services." Blake checked his watch. Today was Tuesday. That should be sufficient pressure. As Blake watched, Ian opened his front door and pointed for Cheryl to leave. She stood on his porch, pleading, but Ian slammed the door in her face. Cheryl stood there for several minutes, crying, before finally returning to her car. Blake followed her as she drove not home, but to an apartment complex on Maple Street, the secret apartment she'd maintained for 3 years. He watched her enter the building, then called Tommy Williams. "I need you to check something for me. Cheryl Sullivan, apartment 4B at the Maple Street complex. I need to know who else has access to that unit." 20 minutes later, Tommy called back. "The lease is in her name only, but building security cameras show Ian Snell has been a regular visitor for the past 2 years. Looks like he has a key." Blake smiled. Ian would undoubtedly use his key to confront Cheryl in her private space, the apartment where she constructed her single mother persona. The pressure was building exactly as Blake had planned. The next morning brought the news Blake had been waiting for. Tommy's surveillance revealed that Ian had indeed gone to Cheryl's apartment the previous night. Neighbors reported loud arguing that lasted until nearly 2 a.m. More importantly, Ian had left with several suitcases, suggesting he was moving out of the house they'd shared. Blake's phone rang at 10 a.m. "Ian Snell. I need to talk to you," Ian said. His voice was strained, exhausted. "Of course. Where would you like to meet?" They agreed on a diner across town, neutral territory where they could speak privately. Blake arrived first and watched Ian enter, noting the man's haggard appearance. 2 days of learning the truth about Cheryl had clearly taken their toll. "She's been lying about everything," Ian said without preamble as he sat down. "The apartment, the money, the story about you being abusive. Everything. I know. She had credit cards I didn't know about. bank accounts in her maiden name. She's been living 3 different lives, with you, with me, and completely alone in that apartment. Blake leaned back in his booth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Ian's voice was broken. Sophia? God, what am I supposed to tell Sophia? She thinks I'm her father. She doesn't even know you exist. That's your problem, Ian. You chose to build a relationship with a married woman. You chose to believe her lies about being separated. You chose to claim another man's child as your own. Ian looked up sharply. I didn't choose anything. I was lied to. Were you? Blake's voice was cold. Or did you choose not to ask too many questions because the story Cheryl told you made you feel like a hero? The knight in shining armor, rescuing the damsel in distress. Ian started to protest, but Blake continued. Did you ever ask to see divorce papers? Did you ever question why a supposedly separated woman still lived with her abusive husband? Did you ever wonder why she wouldn't give you her home address or phone number? Each question hit like a physical blow. Blake could see Ian realizing that he had, in fact, made choices to believe what was convenient rather than demand proof. You wanted to believe you were the good guy, Blake said. You wanted to believe you were saving Cheryl from a terrible situation, so you didn't look too hard at inconsistencies in her story. What do you want from me? Ian asked desperately. Blake leaned forward. I want you to help me make sure Cheryl faces consequences for what she's done. To both of us. How? By telling the truth. All of it. In court, to the authorities, to anyone who asks. No more protecting her. No more covering for her lies. Ian was quiet for a long moment. What about Sophia? What about her? She's going to be destroyed by this. Her entire world is about to collapse. Blake felt no sympathy. Sophia's world was always built on lies, Ian. Better she learns the truth now than continues living in Cheryl's fantasy. She's 5 years old, and that's Cheryl's problem. She created this situation. She can deal with the consequences. Blake stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ian? Dale Knox filed his criminal complaint this morning. You're officially wanted for theft of services in Colorado. I'd suggest getting that debt settled quickly before it becomes a warrant. As Blake walked away, he could hear Ian calling after him, asking for more time, for help, for mercy. Blake ignored him. In his world, mercy was something reserved for the innocent. Ian Snell had made his choices, and now he would live with the consequences. The web was nearly complete. Soon, both Cheryl and Ian would find themselves trapped with no way out, facing the full consequences of their 6-year deception. And Blake would be there to watch them both fall. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. Friday morning brought the collapse Blake had orchestrated. Dale Knox had made good on his threat. Ian Snell was arrested at his construction site on charges of theft of services, with additional charges pending for fraud related to his business practices in Denver. The arrest was very public, in front of Ian's crew and several clients, ensuring maximum damage to his professional reputation. Blake watched the local news coverage from his hotel room, noting how the reporter described Ian as a contractor who allegedly fled Colorado after defrauding multiple subcontractors. The story included file footage of Ian's house and several of his construction projects, effectively destroying his business credibility in Westfield. His phone rang immediately after the news segment ended. Cheryl, sobbing hysterically. Blake, you have to help him. Ian's been arrested, and Sophia saw it on the news. She's asking why the police took her daddy away. Ian Snell is not Sophia's daddy, Blake said calmly. He's a man who stole services in Colorado and fled the state to avoid paying his debts. If Sophia is confused about his relationship to her, that's because you've been lying to her for 5 years. Blake, please. I know you're angry, but this isn't about us anymore. This is about an innocent child. You should have thought about that innocent child before you decided to build her entire life on a foundation of deception. Blake ended the call and immediately dialed his attorney, Gerard Roman. Gerard, I need you to file several motions today. First, I want a restraining order against Cheryl to prevent her from accessing our joint accounts. Second, I want to press charges for identity theft and fraud. Third, I want a divorce filing that requests full disclosure of all her assets. Blake, this is going to get very ugly very quickly. It was always going to get ugly, Gerard. Cheryl made sure of that when she chose to destroy our marriage. Within hours, Cheryl was served with papers at her apartment. The restraining order froze all joint accounts, cutting off her access to the money she'd been using to maintain her double life. The fraud charges carried potential prison time, and the divorce filing demanded a complete accounting of how she'd spent marital assets to fund her affair. Tommy Williams called with updates on Ian's situation. He can't make bail. The judge set it at $200,000, and with his assets frozen for the creditor claims, he doesn't have access to that kind of money. What about his construction business? Dead. 3 clients canceled contracts today, and his bonding company dropped him. Word travels fast in the construction world. Blake felt the familiar satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. Both Cheryl and Ian were now facing the complete destruction of their lives, just as they had destroyed his marriage through their deception. That afternoon, Blake received an unexpected visitor at his hotel. A woman in her 60s, well-dressed, but obviously distraught. "Mr. Sullivan? I'm Margaret Snell, Ian's mother. I need to speak with you about Sophia." Blake studied the woman carefully. She had Ian's eyes, but none of his easy charm. This was clearly someone accustomed to getting her way through direct confrontation rather than manipulation. "I'm not sure what we have to discuss, Mrs. Snell. We have a 5-year-old child to discuss. A child who has been calling my son daddy for her entire life and who is now traumatized because she doesn't understand why he's been arrested. Sophia is not my responsibility." Margaret Snell's eyes flashed with anger. "She may not be your responsibility, but she's an innocent victim in this situation. And right now, she needs stability. Then perhaps you should discuss that with her mother. Her mother is falling apart. Cheryl is barely functional, and Sophia is asking questions she can't answer. The child doesn't even know you exist." Blake felt a flicker of something, not sympathy, but calculation. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Mrs. Snell?" "I'm asking you to consider what's best for the child. Ian may not be her biological father, but he's the only father she's ever known. She loves him, and he loves her. Ian is in jail for fraud and theft. He's not in a position to father anyone. Ian made mistakes, but he's not a bad man. He was lied to and manipulated, just like you were." Blake laughed harshly. Ian chose to believe those lies because they made him feel good about himself. He chose not to ask hard questions because he liked being the hero in Cheryl's story. Those were conscious choices. Margaret Snell leaned forward. "What if I could guarantee Ian would cooperate fully with your divorce proceedings? What if he testified about everything Cheryl told him, every lie she asked him to believe?" Blake felt his interest sharpen. "Go on. Ian has recordings. Voicemails from Cheryl talking about you, about their relationship, about her plans. He also has text messages going back years. Everything you need to prove her deception in court. And in exchange, you help Ian make bail and don't oppose his request for visitation rights with Sophia during the custody proceedings." Blake considered the offer. Ian's testimony and evidence would be devastating to Cheryl in divorce court, potentially saving Blake millions in settlement costs. The recordings would also provide evidence for criminal prosecution. "What makes you think Ian would honor such an agreement?" "Because he knows his only chance of having any relationship with Sophia is if you allow it. Cross you, and he loses everything." Blake stood and walked to the hotel window, looking out at the city where his life had been torn apart by lies. "Mrs. Snell, I want you to understand something. I don't forgive people who betray me. Ever. Your son participated in the destruction of my marriage, whether he knew it or not. The only reason I'd consider helping him is if it serves my own interests. I understand. If I agree to this, Ian will testify to everything. Every lie Cheryl told him, every deception she asked him to participate in. He'll turn over all recordings, messages, and documents. And he'll do it knowing that if he tries to protect her in any way, I'll destroy him completely." Margaret Snell nodded. "He'll agree to those terms." Blake turned back to face her. "And you'll guarantee his cooperation?" "I'll guarantee it." Blake smiled coldly. "Then make the call, Mrs. Snell. Tell your son that if he wants to see Sophia again, he's going to help me bury the woman who lied to both of us." As Margaret Snell made the call to Ian's attorney, Blake felt the final pieces of his revenge falling into place. Soon, Cheryl would face her husband and her lover united against her, armed with recordings of her own words condemning her. She had spent 6 years playing them against each other with lies and manipulation. Now she would face them both, and the truth would destroy her completely. Chapter 7. The Testimony. The Westfield County Courthouse buzzed with activity as Blake's divorce proceedings began. What should have been a routine dissolution of marriage had become a spectacle, with local media covering the case due to the sensational details that had emerged during pretrial discovery. Blake sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, Gerard Roman, while across the aisle Cheryl huddled with her lawyer, a nervous young man named Benjamin Marsh who looked overwhelmed by the case's complexity. Behind Blake, in the gallery, sat Ian Snell, recently released on bail and looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Judge Claudia Goff, a stern woman in her 50s known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, called the court to order. This is a divorce proceeding with allegations of fraud, identity theft, and adultery, she announced. I'll warn all parties that I have zero tolerance for dramatics or emotional outbursts. We're here to determine facts and divide assets according to law. Gerard Roman stood for his opening statement. Your Honor, this case represents one of the most elaborate and systematic deceptions I've encountered in 25 years of family law. The defendant didn't simply have an affair. She constructed an entirely false life, complete with forged documents, stolen identity, and a child she's allowed to believe my client is her absent father. Benjamin Marsh objected. Your Honor, these are inflammatory characterizations. Overruled. Mr. Roman, proceed with your evidence. Gerard's first witness was Charles Gonzalez, Blake's accountant, who testified about the systematic theft of marital assets. Over 4 years, Mrs. Sullivan withdrew $74,847 from joint accounts through carefully spaced transactions designed to avoid detection. She also used Mr. Sullivan's Social Security number to co-sign business loans totaling $312,000 without his knowledge or consent. Cheryl's attorney tried to object, but Charles had documentation for every claim. Bank records, loan applications with forged signatures, and a paper trail that painted a picture of deliberate financial fraud. Did Mrs. Sullivan have legitimate access to these accounts? Gerard asked. As a spouse, she had legal access to the joint accounts. However, the pattern of withdrawals suggests deliberate concealment. Small amounts, always under reporting thresholds, often on days when Mr. Sullivan was traveling for work. Blake watched Cheryl as the evidence mounted against her. She kept her eyes down, occasionally whispering to her attorney, but her body language betrayed her growing desperation. Gerard's second witness was Tommy Williams, the private investigator, who presented surveillance evidence showing Cheryl living openly with Ian Snell while maintaining her marriage to Blake. Photos showed her at parent-teacher conferences, community events, and family gatherings where she was introduced as Ian's girlfriend and Sophia's mother. Did you find evidence that Mrs. Sullivan was maintaining multiple residences? Gerard asked. Yes. In addition to the marital home with Mr. Sullivan, she maintained an apartment on Maple Street under her maiden name and spent most nights at Mr. Snell's house on Elm Street. 3 different addresses. 3 different lives, sir. At each location, she presented herself differently, devoted wife, single mother, or live-in girlfriend. When Gerard called Ian Snell to testify, the courtroom grew silent. Ian walked to the witness stand looking like a man heading to his own execution. Mr. Snell, how long did you know Mrs. Sullivan? 6 years. And what did she tell you about her marriage to Mr. Blake Sullivan? Ian's voice was barely audible. She told me they were separated, that he was emotionally abusive and controlling, that she was afraid to file for divorce because of his connections in law enforcement. Did you ever see divorce papers or separation agreements? No. She said she was handling it through her attorney and didn't want to discuss details because it upset her. Gerard introduced a series of recordings, voicemails Cheryl had left for Ian over the years. Her voice filled the courtroom, describing Blake as paranoid and dangerous, claiming he monitored her activities and threatened her when she talked about leaving. That's my husband, Ian. The one I told you about who watches my every move. He's working late again, probably going through my phone records and credit card statements. I hate living in fear like this. Blake listened to his wife's voice, describing him as a monster to her lover, and felt his resolve harden. Any lingering doubt about the necessity of his revenge vanished as he heard himself portrayed as the villain in Cheryl's elaborate fiction. Mr. Snell, did Mrs. Sullivan ever tell you about the child she wanted to have with you? She said she'd always wanted children, but that her husband refused. She said Blake told her kids would ruin their lifestyle and that he'd threatened to leave her if she got pregnant. More lies. Blake and Cheryl had been trying to have children for years, but she'd always claimed fertility issues and refused medical intervention. When Sophia was born, what did Mrs. Sullivan tell you about the birth certificate? She said she'd listed me as the father because Blake had refused to acknowledge the pregnancy. She said it was necessary to protect Sophia from his influence. Gerard introduced the birth certificate. Sophia Snell, father listed as Ian Snell, no mention of Blake Sullivan anywhere in the document. It was a legal fiction that had allowed Ian to claim the child for tax purposes while Blake remained unaware of her existence. Your Honor, Gerard said, this document represents fraud on multiple levels. Mrs. Sullivan knowingly filed false information with the state, allowed Mr. Snell to claim tax benefits for a child who isn't his, and deprived my client of his parental rights. Cheryl's attorney finally attempted a defense during cross-examination of Ian. Mr. Snell, isn't it true that you wanted to believe Mrs. Sullivan's story because it justified your relationship with a married woman? Ian was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, but that doesn't change the fact that she lied to me about everything. You never tried to verify her claims about being separated? I trusted her. I loved her. I thought she loved me. And now you're testifying against her to save yourself from prison time. Ian looked directly at Cheryl for the first time since taking the stand. I'm testifying against her because she destroyed my life with lies. She made me believe I was Sophia's father, let me love that child as my own, then used my feelings to manipulate me into helping her betray her husband. The raw pain in Ian's voice was evident to everyone in the courtroom. Blake felt a moment of satisfaction. Ian was finally understanding the full scope of Cheryl's manipulation. When Gerard called Blake to testify, the courtroom was packed with spectators drawn by the media coverage. Mr. Sullivan, did you have any knowledge of your wife's relationship with Ian Snell? None whatsoever. I trusted my wife completely and had no reason to suspect she was living a double life. What was your understanding of why you and Mrs. Sullivan had no children? She claimed we had fertility issues and insisted on trying naturally rather than seeking medical help. I now understand she was using birth control while telling me she wanted children. How did you discover the truth? Blake described the grocery store encounter with Sophia, watching the jury's faces as they absorbed the implications of a child mistaking him for her father. What was your emotional response to learning about the affair and the child? Blake's answer was measured and cold. I felt betrayed on every level. My wife had not only been unfaithful, but had created an elaborate deception that made me complicit in her lies. She'd allowed another man to claim fatherhood of a child while telling that child I was her absent father. Gerard introduced Blake's financial records, showing the systematic theft of marital assets to fund Cheryl's double life. Did you give Mrs. Sullivan permission to use your social security number for business loans? Absolutely not. I learned about those loans during my attorney's discover process. My wife committed identity theft to help her lover's business while I remained unaware. During cross-examination, Benjamin Marsh tried to paint Blake as a controlling husband who drove his wife to seek affection elsewhere. Isn't it true, Mr. Sullivan, that you were often absent from home, leaving your wife lonely and neglected? I traveled for work, yes, but I was building our future and supporting the lifestyle my wife demanded. I never gave her reason to doubt my commitment to our marriage. You've shown no emotion about losing your wife or concern for the child involved. Blake's response was ice cold. My wife chose to destroy our marriage through systematic deception. The child is a victim of her mother's lies. not my responsibility. So you feel no sympathy for Sophia? I feel sympathy for any child raised on lies, but I cannot take responsibility for problems created by someone else's choices. Blake's testimony lasted 3 hours, during which he methodically detailed every aspect of Cheryl's deception. By the time he stepped down, the case was effectively over. Judge Goff called a recess before closing arguments, and Blake watched Cheryl collapse in tears at the defendant's table. Her attorney looked defeated, and the gallery buzzed with whispered conversations about the devastating testimony they'd witnessed. The web Blake had constructed around his wife was complete. Tomorrow would bring the judge's ruling, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Cheryl Sullivan had been exposed as a fraud, a thief, and a master manipulator who had destroyed multiple lives in service of her own selfish desires. And Blake felt nothing but cold satisfaction as he watched her world crumble completely. Chapter 8. The Judgment. Judge Claudia Goff delivered her verdict with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. After reviewing the evidence overnight, she reconvened court with an expression that suggested she'd found the case personally offensive. In 22 years on the bench, she began, I have rarely encountered such systematic and calculating deception within a marriage. This case represents not simply adultery, but fraud, identity theft, and child exploitation. Blake sat motionless as the judge continued, noting Cheryl's trembling hands as she gripped the defendant's table. Mrs. Sullivan, your actions constitute a complete betrayal of the marriage contract and the legal system itself. You have stolen marital assets, forged legal documents, and created false identities to facilitate your deception. More troubling, you have psychologically manipulated a child to serve your elaborate fiction. Judge Goff's voice grew harder. The evidence shows you allowed Mr. Snell to claim paternity of a child who is not his biological offspring, depriving Mr. Sullivan of his parental rights while enabling Mr. Snell to claim fraudulent tax benefits. You have created legal documents listing false information and used your husband's identity without consent. Cheryl's attorney attempted to interject. Your Honor, if we could consider mitigating circumstances. There are no mitigating circumstances for fraud, Mr. Marsh. Your client's actions were deliberate, systematic, and designed to benefit herself at the expense of multiple victims. Judge Goff turned to the matter of asset division. Given the evidence of financial fraud and identity theft, I am awarding Mr. Sullivan the entirety of the marital assets. Mrs. Sullivan has forfeited any claim to community property through her criminal behavior. Blake felt cold satisfaction as Cheryl gasped audibly. She would leave the marriage with nothing. No house, no savings, no retirement accounts. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mrs. Sullivan will be responsible for the $312,000 in fraudulent business loans she secured using Mr. Sullivan's identity. These debts will not be divided as marital obligations since they were obtained through criminal means. The crushing financial judgment was only the beginning. Judge Goff addressed the matter of Sophia's paternity. This court orders immediate DNA testing to establish the biological father of the minor child. Additionally, the false birth certificate listing Mr. Snell as the father will be amended to reflect accurate information once paternity is established. Blake watched Ian Snell shift uncomfortably in the gallery. The man who had played father to Sophia for 5 years was about to lose any legal claim to the child he'd raised. Mrs. Sullivan, you will also face separate criminal charges for identity theft, fraud, and filing false legal documents. This court is referring your case to the district attorney's office for prosecution. Cheryl was now openly sobbing, but Judge Goff showed no sympathy. Your actions have traumatized a child, destroyed multiple lives, and made a mockery of the institution of marriage. The damage you have caused through your selfishness is incalculable. The judge turned to Blake. Mr. Sullivan, while I understand your anger, I encourage you to consider the welfare of the minor child in future proceedings. Regardless of the circumstances of her birth, Sophia is an innocent victim who has known no other father than Mr. Snell. Blake's response was measured. Your Honor, I appreciate the court's concern, but I cannot take responsibility for problems created by someone else's deception. If Sophia is traumatized, that is the direct result of her mother's choices. Judge Goff nodded grimly. Nevertheless, future custody arrangements will need to consider the child's emotional well-being and existing relationships. After court adjourned, Blake stood outside the courthouse watching Cheryl emerge in handcuffs. The criminal charges had been filed immediately, and bail had been set at $500,000. She looked broken, defeated. Her perfect facade finally crumbled. Ian Snell approached Blake hesitantly. "What happens now?" "To Sophia, I mean." "That depends on the DNA test," Blake replied coldly. "If she's my biological daughter, she'll be placed in state custody while I decide whether to pursue parental rights. If she's not, she'll remain in state custody while the court determines her best interests. She doesn't deserve this. She's innocent." Blake turned to face Ian directly. "Sophia is a victim of her mother's lies, not my responsibility. If you wanted to protect her, you should have demanded proof that Cheryl was actually separated before you started playing house with a married woman." "I was lied to." "You were told what you wanted to hear, and you chose not to look too closely because the truth would have complicated your fantasy." Blake's voice was ice cold. "Now you're all facing the consequences of those choices." Blake walked away, leaving Ian standing alone outside the courthouse where his world had officially ended. That evening, Blake received a call from Tommy Williams. "Cheryl's apartment has been cleared out. Looks like someone grabbed everything valuable and disappeared. Cheryl's in jail." "Not Cheryl. Someone else." Neighbors saw a woman matching Margaret Snell's description loading boxes into a truck this morning. Blake considered this development. Ian's mother was apparently attempting to preserve some assets before creditors could claim them, a futile gesture since the court judgment had been crystal clear. His phone rang again. Gerard Roman. "Blake, we have a problem. Cheryl's attorney is claiming she has information about federal tax fraud involving Ian's business. He's suggesting she might cooperate with authorities in exchange for reduced charges." Blake smiled coldly. Even facing complete destruction, Cheryl was looking for angles, trying to find leverage against the man she'd manipulated for 6 years. "Let her cooperate," Blake said. "Ian's business is already destroyed, and any tax fraud charges will only add to his problems. Cheryl has nothing left to bargain with." "There's something else." The DNA results came back early. "Sophia is your biological daughter." Blake was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Despite everything, some part of him had hoped the child wasn't his, that he could walk away from this situation without any ongoing complications. "What are my options? You can pursue custody, abandon parental rights, or arrange for supervised visitation. Given the circumstances, the court will likely support whatever decision you make." Blake considered his choices. Sophia was his daughter biologically, but she'd been raised believing Ian Snell was her father. She had no knowledge of Blake's existence and would undoubtedly be traumatized by the truth. "I want to see her first," Blake decided, "before I make any long-term decisions. I'll arrange a supervised visit through family services." As Blake ended the call, he reflected on the complete destruction he'd orchestrated. Cheryl faced years in prison and crushing debt. Ian's business was ruined, his reputation destroyed, and his parental rights terminated. Both of his betrayers had lost everything. But there was still the matter of Sophia, an innocent child caught in the middle of adult deceptions. Blake felt no paternal instincts toward her, no emotional connection to a daughter who'd been hidden from him for 5 years. She was simply another complication created by Cheryl's lies. Tomorrow, he would meet the child who carried his DNA but called another man daddy. He would look into the eyes of a 5-year-old whose entire world had been built on deception and decide whether she deserved any place in his life. Blake Sullivan had always been a man who dealt in absolutes, trust or betrayal, loyalty or abandonment, mercy or destruction. Now he faced the most difficult decision of his life: what to do with the innocent victim of his wife's elaborate deception. The child who might be the only person in this entire situation who truly deserved his mercy. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. 6 months after the courthouse judgment, Blake Sullivan sat in his study reviewing the aftermath of his methodical destruction of Cheryl and Ian's lives. The satisfaction he'd expected to feel remained elusive, replaced by something colder and more complex. Cheryl had been sentenced to 4 years in state prison for fraud and identity theft. The judge had shown no mercy, citing the systematic nature of her deceptions and the harm caused to multiple victims. She would serve at least 2.5 years before becoming eligible for parole. Ian Snell had fared even worse. The federal tax charges Cheryl had helped prosecutors build against him had resulted in a 6-year sentence. His construction business had been liquidated to pay creditors, and he'd lost his house to foreclosure. Dale Knox had eventually collected his $60,000, but Ian's reputation in the construction industry was permanently destroyed. Margaret Snell had been arrested for attempting to hide assets and received 18 months probation. Her attempt to preserve something from the wreckage had only added to her son's legal troubles. Blake's phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. The final asset seizures had been completed. Every trace of the life Cheryl and Ian had built together had been systematically dismantled and liquidated. The apartment on Maple Street, the house on Elm Street, the construction equipment, even Sophia's swing set, everything had been sold to satisfy court judgments and creditor claims. But it was the other text that gave Blake pause, from the family services caseworker who supervised his monthly visits with Sophia. Sophia continues to ask when her daddy is coming home. Her therapist believes she would benefit from more frequent contact with you as her biological father. Blake had been visiting his daughter once a month for 6 months. Awkward sessions in a sterile conference room where a traumatized child tried to understand why the world she'd known had disappeared. Sophia still called Ian daddy and asked repeatedly when he was coming home from his business trip. The child psychologist had been blunt in their last meeting. Sophia has experienced profound trauma from the sudden loss of her primary attachment figure. She doesn't understand concepts like fraud or deception. She only knows that the man she considered her father has vanished from her life. Blake had listened to the diagnosis with his characteristic emotional detachment. What are you recommending? She needs stability and consistency. Right now, she's in foster care with a good family, but she would benefit from a permanent placement. You have the legal right to petition for custody. And if I don't, then she'll remain in the system until a suitable adoptive family can be found. Given her age and the trauma she's experienced, that could take years. Blake had left that meeting without making any commitments. Sophia was his biological daughter, but she felt like a stranger, a 5-year-old victim of her mother's lies who looked at him with confusion and fear during their supervised visits. His doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Blake opened the door to find Dale Knox, the electrician from Denver who had pursued Ian across state lines to collect his debt. Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to thank you in person. Blake studied the older man, noting his work-worn hands and direct gaze. For what? For helping me get justice. Ian Snell stole $60,000 from me and nearly bankrupted my business. When he disappeared to Westfield, I thought I'd never see that money. You did the work to find him and pursue the charges. But you gave me the leverage I needed. Without your investigation and the pressure you put on him, Ian would have kept running. Dale paused. I heard about the child, about how she's caught in the middle of all this. Blake's expression hardened. Sophia is not my concern. Isn't she? Dale's voice was gentle but firm. From what I understand, that little girl is as much a victim of Ian and your wife's lies as you were. Maybe more. I didn't create this situation. No, but you're the only one with the power to fix it. Ian's in prison, your wife's in prison, and that little girl is in foster care, asking why her daddy abandoned her. Blake felt a flicker of irritation. Ian Snell is not her father. He's the only father she's ever known. And right now, she's probably thinking he stopped loving her, which is why he went away. Dale Knox stepped closer, his voice taking on the intensity of a man who'd spent months pursuing justice. Mr. Sullivan, I've spent the last year watching you systematically destroy everyone who wronged you. You're thorough, I'll give you that. But there's one person in this whole mess who never wronged you, never lied to you, never betrayed you. And she's the one suffering the most. Blake's jaw tightened. What do you want from me? I want you to consider that maybe justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. Maybe it's also about protecting the innocent. After Dale left, Blake found himself driving to the family services office. He arrived during visiting hours and asked to see Sophia. The caseworker led him to the familiar conference room where his daughter sat coloring at a small table. She looked up when he entered, her brown eyes, so much like his own, filled with wariness. "Hi, Sophia." "Hi." Her voice was small, uncertain. Blake sat across from her, studying the child who carried his DNA but felt like a stranger. "What are you drawing?" "A house." She held up her picture, a simple child's drawing of a house with 3 stick figures in front. "That's me, and that's Mommy, and that's Daddy." Blake looked at the figure labeled Daddy, a tall stick figure with dark hair who clearly represented Ian Snell. "Sophia, do you remember what the caseworker told you about me?" She nodded solemnly. "You're my real daddy, but I don't understand why I have 2 daddies." Blake felt something crack inside his chest. Not sympathy, exactly, but recognition of the impossible situation his wife had created. This child had been living in a fantasy world constructed by lies, and the truth was more confusing than illuminating. "It's complicated," he said finally. "When is Daddy Ian coming home?" The question Blake had been dreading. He looked into his daughter's hopeful face and felt the weight of absolute honesty. "Daddy Ian isn't coming home, Sophia. He's going to be away for a very long time." Her lower lip began to tremble. "Did I do something wrong? Is that why he left?" "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. The adults made some very bad choices, and now everyone has to deal with the consequences." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing information far too complex for a 5-year-old mind. "Are you going to leave too?" Blake stared at his daughter, truly looked at her for the first time since this ordeal began. She was small, vulnerable, trapped in a situation entirely beyond her control. And despite his anger at Cheryl and Ian, despite his refusal to forgive anyone who had betrayed him, Sophia had never betrayed anyone. She was innocent. "No," Blake heard himself say. "I'm not going to leave." 3 months later, Blake stood in the same courthouse where he destroyed his wife's life, this time petitioning for custody of his daughter. The judge was different, but the gravity of the situation was the same. "Mr. Sullivan, you understand that custody involves significant responsibilities and sacrifices?" "I understand, Your Honor. The child has experienced severe trauma and will require ongoing therapy and support. Are you prepared for that commitment?" Blake looked at Sophia, sitting with her caseworker in the gallery. She was wearing a new dress he'd bought her and clutching a stuffed animal, small signs of the stability he'd been trying to provide during their increased visitation. "I'm prepared, Your Honor." The judge granted the custody petition, and Blake felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Not satisfaction from destroying his enemies, but the quiet weight of responsibility for protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. That evening, Blake sat in his study while Sophia played in her new bedroom, the room he'd spent 2 weeks preparing with furniture, toys, and decorations appropriate for a 5-year-old girl. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now caring for the child his wife had hidden from him while conducting her affair. His phone rang. Gerard Roman. "Blake, I have news about Cheryl. She's requesting a meeting. Says she has something important to tell you about Sophia." Blake considered this. Cheryl had lost every appeal, exhausted every legal option, and was serving her sentence in a women's facility 2 hours away. What could she possibly have left to say? "Schedule it," Blake decided. "I'll see what she wants." 1 week later, Blake sat across from his ex-wife in the prison visiting room. Cheryl looked haggard, her blonde hair now showing gray roots, her face gaunt from prison food and stress. The elegant woman who had deceived him for 6 years was gone, replaced by someone who looked older and defeated. "Blake, thank you for coming." "What do you want, Cheryl?" She gestured toward the photographs Blake had brought, pictures of Sophia in her new room at the park during their first family dinner. Images of a child adapting to a new life with her biological father. "She looks happy," Cheryl said quietly. "She's adjusting. I heard Ian try to contact her through his mother." Blake's expression hardened. That contact was blocked. Ian Snell has no legal relationship to Sophia. "Blake, I know you hate me. I know you'll never forgive me for what I did. But I need to tell you something about the night Sophia was conceived. Blake waited, his face impassive. It was the night you got back from the Henderson case. You'd been gone for 3 weeks, and I was angry that you'd missed our anniversary. I went to meet Ian at a hotel, planning to... She paused, struggling with the words. But I couldn't go through with it. I came home to you instead. Blake felt something cold settle in his stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that despite everything I told Ian, despite all the lies I told you both, Sophia was conceived that night. With you, not with Ian. The implications hit Blake like a physical blow. Cheryl had known from the moment of conception that Sophia was his daughter, not Ian's. The entire fiction about Ian being the father was just another layer of deception. You let Ian raise my daughter, knowing she wasn't his. I let Ian love her. I let her love him. And whatever you think of me, Blake, they had a real relationship. Ian didn't love Sophia because of biology. He loved her because she was his daughter in every way that mattered. Blake stared at his ex-wife with undisguised contempt. You're telling me this why? Because Sophia asks about him every day. Because she misses the man she considers her real father. And because no matter how much you hate me, no matter how much you want to punish everyone who wronged you, she's innocent. I know she's innocent. That's why she's living with me instead of in foster care. But are you taking care of her because you love her or because it's your duty as her biological father? Blake was quiet for a long moment. The distinction mattered more than he wanted to admit. Ian made mistakes, Cheryl continued. We both did. But his love for Sophia was real. And her love for him was real. You can keep them apart forever, or you can consider what's actually best for your daughter. Blake stood to leave. Goodbye, Cheryl. Blake, wait. There's something else. He paused, but didn't sit down. Ian wrote her letters. Dozens of them. His mother has been holding them, waiting for someone to approve their delivery. They're not about me or our relationship. They're just letters from a father to his daughter. Blake left the prison with Cheryl's words echoing in his mind. That evening, he watched Sophia playing with her dolls, creating elaborate scenarios of families and homes and stability. She was adapting to life with him, but he could see the sadness in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. His phone rang. Margaret Snell. Mr. Sullivan? I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I have something that belongs to Sophia. Blake agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop across town, where they could speak privately. Margaret arrived carrying a small wooden box. These are Ian's letters to Sophia, she said without preamble. He's been writing to her every week since he was incarcerated. They're not about the legal situation or about Cheryl. They're just letters from someone who loves her. Blake examined the box, but didn't open it. Why bring these to me? Because Ian knows he'll never see Sophia again. He knows what he did was wrong, even if he didn't understand it at the time. But he also knows that little girl is wondering why her daddy stopped loving her. Margaret Snell leaned forward, her voice intense. Mr. Sullivan, I've watched you destroy my son's life, and I can't say he didn't deserve it. But Sophia didn't deserve to lose the only father she'd ever known. I'm her father. You're her biological father. Ian was her daddy, the man who taught her to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories, who held her when she had nightmares. You can't replace that relationship, no matter how hard you try. Blake felt the familiar anger rising. Ian built that relationship on lies. Ian built that relationship on love. The lies came from Cheryl, not from him. Margaret placed a box on the table between them. Read them. If you think they're inappropriate, destroy them. But if they're just letters from someone who loves her, maybe consider letting her have them. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Blake opened the box and began reading Ian's letters. They were exactly what Margaret had described. Simple notes from a man who missed the child he'd raised. Stories about his day, memories of their time together, expressions of love and hope that she was happy. One letter stood out. Dear Sophia, I hope you understand that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt the people they love. I made mistakes, and now I can't be with you the way I want to be. But I want you to know that being your daddy was the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me want to be a better person. I hope your real daddy takes good care of you, and that you're happy. Love always, Daddy Ian. Blake set the letters aside and went to check on Sophia. She was sleeping peacefully, surrounded by the toys and decorations he'd provided, but her nightstand held a framed photo of her with Ian at the park, a picture she'd insisted on keeping despite everything that had happened. Blake Sullivan had spent his entire adult life believing in absolutes: trust or betrayal, loyalty or abandonment, mercy or destruction. He'd built his reputation on the principle that betrayers deserved no forgiveness, no second chances, no mercy. But as he looked at his sleeping daughter, Blake realized that sometimes the most powerful choice wasn't between mercy and justice. Sometimes it was between punishment and healing. The next morning, Blake made a call to the prison where Ian was serving his sentence. "This is Blake Sullivan. I'd like to arrange for my daughter to receive some letters." 3 months later, Blake sat in the visiting area of the federal prison, watching through bulletproof glass as Sophia spoke on the phone to Ian Snell. It was their first conversation since Ian's arrest, and Blake could see the joy in his daughter's face as she talked to the man she still considered her daddy. "Are you coming home soon?" Sophia asked into the phone. Ian's response was gentle but honest. "No, sweetheart. I have to stay here for a long time because I made some bad choices. But I want you to know that I love you very much, and I'm so proud of you for being brave." "Blake is taking good care of me," Sophia said. "He's teaching me to play chess, and we're reading Harry Potter together." Blake watched Ian's face through the glass, seeing genuine gratitude despite everything that had happened between them. "I'm glad you have someone good to take care of you," Ian said. "Blake is your